Recording to the club. Hi, welcome to the UPM book club. Today we are reading the last chapter of The Wretched of the Earth, Colonial War and Mental Disorders. Comrade Rod, you have the floor.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Colonial War and Mental Disorders. But the war goes on, and for many years to come, we shall be bandaging the countless and sometimes indelible wounds inflicted on our people by the colonialist onslaught. Imperialism, which today is waging war against a genuine struggle for human liberation, sows seeds of decay here and there that must be mercilessly rooted out from our land and from our minds. We shall deal here with the problem of mental disorders born out of the national war of liberation waged by the Algerian people. Perhaps the reader will find these notes on psychiatry out of place or untimely in a book like this. There is absolutely nothing we can do about that. We had no control over the fact that the psychiatric phenomena, the mental and behavioral disorders emerging from this war, have loomed so large among the perpetrators of pacification and the pacified population. The truth is that colonization, in its very essence, already appeared to be a great purveyor of psychiatric hospitals. Since 1954, we have drawn the attention of French and international psychiatrists in scientific works to the difficulty of curing a colonized subject correctly. In other words, making him thoroughly fit into a social environment of the colonial type. Because it is a systematized negation of the other, a frenzied determination to deny the other any attribute of humanity. Colonialism forces the colonized to constantly ask the question, who am I in reality? The defensive positions born of this violent confrontation between the colonized and the colonial constitute a structure which then reveals the colonized personality. In order to understand this sensibility, we need only to study and appreciate the scope and depth of the wounds inflicted on the colonized during a single day under a colonial regime. We must remember that in any case, that a colonized people is not just a dominated people. Under the German occupation, the French remained human beings. Under the French occupation, the Germans remained human beings. In Algeria, there is not simply domination, but a decision literally to occupy nothing else but a territory. The Algerians, the women dressed in haïks, the palm groves, and the camels form a landscape, the natural backdrop for the French presence. A hostile, ungovernable, and fundamentally rebellious nature is in fact synonymous in the colonies with the bush, the mosquitoes, the natives, and disease. Colonization has succeeded once this untamed nature has been brought under control. Cutting railroads through the bush, draining swamps, and ignoring the political and economic existence of the native population are in fact one and the same thing. When colonization remains unchallenged by armed resistance, when the sum of harmful stimulants exceed a certain threshold, the colonized defenses collapse, and many of them end up in psychiatric institutions. In the calm of this period of triumphant colonization, a constant and considerable stream of mental symptoms are direct sequels of this oppression. Today, the all-out national war of liberation waged by the Algerian people for 7 years have become a breeding ground for mental disorders. We include here cases of Algerian and French patients under our care, which we think particularly meaningful. We need hardly add that our approach here is not that of a scientific work, and we have avoided any semiological, nosological, or therapeutic discussion. The few technical terms used here are solely meant as point of reference. We must, however, insist on 2 points. As a general rule, the clinical psychiatry classifies the various disorders presented by our patients under the heading psychotic reaction. In doing so, priority is given to the situation that triggered the disorder, although here and there, mention is made of the role played by the subject's psychological, affective, and biological history, and that of his milieu. We believe that in cases presented here, the triggering factor is principally the bloody, pitiless atmosphere, the generalization of inhuman practices, of people's lasting impression that they are witnessing a veritable apocalypse. Case number 2 of Series A is typical psychotic reaction, but case numbers 1, 2, 4, and 5 of Series B suppose a much vulgar casualty, although we cannot really point to a particular triggering situation. Here it is the war, this colonial war that very often takes on the aspect of genuine genocide, this war which radically disrupts and shatters the world, which is in fact the triggering situation. These are brief psychotic disorders, if we want to use the official term, but putting particular emphasis on war in general and the specific circumstances of a colonial war. After the two major world wars, there was a host of publications on the mental pathology of soldiers engaged in action, as well as the civilian refugees and bombing victims. The novel physiognomy
Yep.
physiognomy of some of the case histories mentioned here provides confirmation, if we still needed it, that this colonial war is a new phenomenon, even in the pathology it produces. Another well-established notion that deserves, in our opinion, to be re-evaluated is that these psychotic reactions are relatively benign. Anniversary reactions, i.e., cases where the entire personality has been definitively dislocated, have of course been described, but always as exceptional cases. We believe, on the contrary, that the pathological process tend as a rule to be frequently malignant. These disorders last for months, wage a massive attack on the ego, and almost invariably leave behind a vulnerability virtually visible to the naked eye. In all evidence, the future of these patients is compromised. The following example will illustrate our standpoint. In a certain African country, independent for some years now, we have had the opportunity of treating a patriot and a former resistance fighter. The man in his 30s would come and ask us for advice and help since he was afflicted with insomnia together with anxiety attacks and obsession with suicide around a certain date in the year. The critical date corresponded to the day that he had been ordered to place a bomb somewhere. 10 people had perished during the attack. This militant, who never for a moment had thought of recanting, fully realized the price he had to pay in his person for national independence. Such borderline cases poses the question of responsibility in the context of revolution. The observations quoted here cover the period between 1954 to 1959. Certain patients were examined in Algeria either in hospitals or private practice. The others were treated in the National Liberation Army's medical facilities. Series A. 5 cases have been collected here, all involving Algerians or Europeans who had clearly defined symptoms of severe reactive disorders. Case number 1, impotence in an Algerian following the rape of his wife. B is a 26-year-old man. He has been referred to us by the medical services of the National Liberation Front for persistent migraines and insomnia. A former taxi driver, he had been a militant in the Nationalist Party since the age of 18. In 1955, he became a member of the FLN unit. On several occasions, he used his taxi to carry propaganda leaflets and political leaders. Confronted with a widening crackdown, the FLN decided to wage a war in the urban centers. B was then assigned to driving commandos close to the points of attack and fairly having to wait for them fairly often. One day, however, right in the middle of the European sector, following a fairly extensive commando raid, the sector was sealed off, forcing him to abandon his taxi and compelling the commando unit to break up and disperse. B, who managed to escape the enemy surveillance, took refuge at a friend's house, and a few days later, on orders from his superiors, went underground to join the nearest resistance unit without ever going home. For several months, he went without news of his wife and his 20-month-old daughter. He did learn, however, that the police had been looking for him for weeks in the city. After 2 years in the resistance movement, he received a message from his wife asking him to forget her. She had brought shame on herself. He must no longer think of coming back to live with her. Extremely worried, he requested permission from his commander to make a secret trip back home. It was refused. However, steps were taken for a member of the FLN to contact B's wife and parents. 2 weeks later, a detailed report reached the commander of B's unit. Soon after, his abandoned taxi has been discovered with 2 machine gun magazines inside. A group of French soldiers and policemen had gone to his home. Finding him absent, they took away his wife and kept her for over a week. She was interrogated about the company her husband kept and slapped fairly violently for 2 days. On the third day, a French soldier, she was unable to say whether he was an officer, ordered the others out and raped her. Shortly afterward, a second soldier, this time in the presence of the others, raped her, telling her, "If you ever see that bastard, your husband, again, don't you forget to tell him what we did to you." She remained another week without undergoing further interrogation. She was then escorted home. When she told her story to her mother, the latter convinced her to tell B everything. As soon as her husband got in touch with her again, she confessed her disgrace. Once the initial shock was over, B soon recovered by devoting every minute of his life to the cause. For several months, he took reports from Algerian women who had been tortured or raped. He had the opportunity of meeting with the husbands of abused women and his personal misfortune. His dignity as an injured husband took second place. In 1958, he was assigned to a mission abroad. Just before rejoining his unit, an unusual distraction and insomnia worried his comrades and his superiors. His departure was delayed and a medical examination ordered. This was when he was referred to us. Our first impression was good. A lively face, a bit too lively perhaps. His smile was slightly forced, his exuberance superficial. I'm okay. I feel better now. Give me a fortifier, some vitamins, and let me go back." He was obviously anxious deep down. He was immediately hospitalized. On the second day, the smokescreen of optimism vanished, and we had on our hands a bedridden anorexic suffering from melancholic depression. He avoided any political discussion and manifested a marked disinterest for anything concerning the national struggle. He avoided listening to news about the War of Liberation. Identifying his problems was extremely laborious, but after several days, we managed to reconstruct his story. During his stay abroad, he had tried to have sexual intercourse but failed. Thinking it was merely fatigue, normal after forced marches and periods of malnutrition, he tried again 2 weeks later and failed again. Spoke to a comrade about it who advised him to take vitamin B. Took it in tablet form. New attempt, new failure. Furthermore, a few moments before the act, he had an irresistible impulse to tear up a photo of his little girl. Such a symbolic connection could raise the possibility of unconscious incestuous drives. However, several conversations and a dream in which the patient witnessed the rapid putrefying of a kitten giving off a nauseating smell led us in a completely new direction. This girl, he told us one day, referring to his daughter, had something rotten inside of her. From that moment on, his insomnia became extremely troubling, and despite a fairly large dose of neuroleptics, he developed a state of nervous anxiety, and that was particularly alarming. He then spoke to us for the first time about his wife and said laughingly, "She got a bit of French meat." It was then that we were able to reconstruct the whole story. The fabric of events became clear. He told us that every time he tried to have sexual intercourse, he thought of his wife. What he confided to us seemed to be of fundamental interest. "I married this girl whereas I was in love with my cousin, but the cousin's parents had arranged to marry their daughter to someone else. So I accepted the first girl my parents offered me. She was nice, but I didn't love her. I kept telling myself, 'You're young, wait a bit. And when you found the right girl, you'll divorce and make a happy marriage.' So I wasn't very attached to my wife. With the war, we moved even further apart. In the end, I used to come and eat my meals and go to bed with hardly a word between us. When I learned during my time with the freedom fighters that she had been raped by some French soldiers, I first of all felt angry with the bastards. Then I said, oh, it's nothing serious. She wasn't killed. She can start her life over again. And then several weeks later, it dawned on me that she had been raped because they had been looking for me. In fact, she had been raped to punish her for keeping quiet. She could have easily given them at least one militant's name, which would have enabled them to discover and eliminate the network, and perhaps even had me arrested. It was not, therefore, a simple rape for want of anything better to do or out of sadism, as I had often seen in the douars. It was the rape of a tenacious woman who was prepared to accept anything rather than give up her husband. And that husband was me. That woman had saved my life and had protected the network. It was my fault she had been dishonored. Yet she didn't say, this is what I endured for you. On the contrary, she said, forget me, start a new life. I have been disgraced. It was then that I made up my mind to take her back after the war. I have to tell you, I've seen peasants dry the tears of their wives who have been raped under their very eyes. That shook me up quite a bit, and I had to confess that at first I couldn't understand their attitude. But we had to intervene increasingly in such circumstances to explain things to the civilians. And I've seen civilians volunteer to marry a young girl who had been raped and made pregnant by French soldiers. All that made me think again about my wife. I've made up my mind to take her back, but I still don't know how I'll react when I see her. And when I look at the picture of my daughter, I often think she was dishonored as well, as if everything that had to do with my wife was rotten. If they had tortured her, if they had broken all of her teeth or arm, I wouldn't have minded so much. But that thing, how can you ever get over it? And did she have to tell me about it? He then asked me whether his sexual failing, in my opinion, was caused by his worrying. Answer, it's quite likely. He then sat up in bed. What would you do if it happened to you? I don't know. Would you take your wife back? I think I would. Ah, you see, you're not quite sure. He put his head in his hand and after a few moments left the room. From that day on, he gradually accepted to listen to political discussions while his migraines and anorexia lessened considerably. After 2 weeks, he rejoined his unit, telling me, on independence, I'll take my wife back. If it doesn't work out, I'll come and see you again in Algiers. Case number 2, random homicidal impulses in a survivor of a massacre. S, 30 years old, a fellah, lives in a douar in the region of Constantine, has never been involved in politics. Since the beginning of the war, his region has been the scene of violent battles between the Algerian forces and the French army. S therefore has had occasion to see the dead and the wounded, but he continued to keep his distance. Like the general population, the peasants from his village had occasionally come to the aid of Algerian fighters that they passed through. But one day in early 1958, a deadly ambush occurred not far from the douar. The enemy forces went into action and surrounded the village where there was not a single soldier. All the inhabitants were rounded up and interrogated. Everyone kept silent. A few hours later, a French officer arrived by helicopter and declared, there's too much fuss over this douar. Destroy it. The soldiers began to set fire to the houses while the women who were trying to collect a few clothes or save some provisions were driven back with rifle butts. Some of the peasants took advantage of the confusion to escape. The officer gave orders to round up the remaining men and had them brought to a neighboring wadi where the massacre began. 29 men were killed at point blank range. S was wounded by 2 bullets that passed through his right thigh and left arm respectively, the latter wound causing a fracture humerus. S fainted and regained consciousness in the midst of a group of ALN soldiers. He was treated by their medical personnel and evacuated once he was able to walk. En route, his increasingly abnormal behavior was a constant source of concern for the escort. He demanded a gun, although he was a helpless victim, and refused to walk in front of anyone. He refused to have anyone behind him. One night, he grabbed one of the soldiers' guns and clumsily fired on the sleeping soldiers. He was disarmed by force. From then on, his hands were tied, and that is how he arrived at the center. He began by telling us that he was not dead and he played a trick on the soldiers. Gradually, we managed to reconstruct the story of his failed assassination attempt. S is not anxious but overexcited with violent mood swings and shouting. He did not break anything but wore everyone out by his constant chatter, and the service was on permanent alert because of his declared intention to kill everyone. During his hospitalization, he would attack roughly 8 patients with makeshift weapons. The nurses and doctors were not spared either. We even wondered whether we were not facing one of those latent forms of epilepsy characterized by general aggressiveness that was almost constantly on edge. We started narcotherapy. After the third day, a daily cross-examination allowed us to better understand the dynamics of the pathological process. His intellectual confusion gradually cleared up. The following are extracts from the patient's statement. God is with me, but he can't have been with those who died. I was damn lucky. In life, it's kill or be killed. When I think I knew nothing about all the business, there are some French among us. They're disguised as Arabs. They've all got to be killed. Give me a machine gun. All these so-called Algerians are French, and they won't leave me alone. As soon as I try to get some sleep, they come into my room, but now I know what they're up to. Everyone wants to kill me, but I'll fight back. I'll kill them all, every single one of them. I'll slit their throats one after the other, and yours as well. You all want to take me out, but you always have to think of other ways. Killing you won't affect me in the slightest. The little ones, the grown-ups, the women, the children, the dogs, the birds, the donkeys, nobody will be spared. Afterwards, I will be able to sleep in peace. All that was said in fits and starts, and he remained hostile, aloof, and scornful. After 3 weeks, his agitated state disappeared, but there was a disinclination to communicate and a tendency to keep to himself, which made us fear the worst. However, after a month, he had asked to leave so he could learn a trade compatible with his disability. He was then entrusted to the care of the FLN's social services. Saw him again 6 months later, doing well. Case number 3, major depressive disorder with mood congruent psychotic features following the murder of a woman while briefly psychotic. D, former student, ALN fighter, 19 years old. When he arrived at the center, he had already been ill for several months. His symptoms were characteristic: deeply depressed, dry lips, constantly moist hands, heaved constant sighs, persistent insomnia, 2 suicide attempts since the onset of the disorder. During the conversation, showed signs of auditory hallucination. Sometimes his gaze fixed for a few moments at a point in space while his face lit up, giving the impression he was seeing something. Incoherent thoughts, behavior known in psychiatry as blocking, where the start of a gesture or phrase is suddenly interrupted for no apparent reason. But one feature in particular caught our attention. The patient talked of his blood being spilled, his arteries drained, and an abnormal heartbeat. He begged us to stop the hemorrhage and not to let them come to the hospital to suck the lifeblood out of him. From time to time, could no longer speak and asked for a pencil, wrote, "Have lost my voice. My whole life is fading away." This display of depression, no, depersonalization, led us to believe he had reached a serious stage. Several times in the course of our conversations, the patient mentioned a woman who would come and persecute him when night fell. Having previously learned that his mother, whom he adored, had died and that he would never get over his loss, at that moment his voice became muffled and a few tears appeared. I turned the cross-examination to the mother image. When I asked him to describe this woman who was haunting, even persecuting him, he told me she was no stranger, that he knew her very well, and that he was the one who had killed her. The question was then of knowing whether we were in the presence of an unconscious guilt complexer after his mother's death, as Freud describes in his Mourning and Melancholia. We asked him to tell us more about this woman since he knew her so well, and he was supposed to have killed her. That is how we managed to reconstruct the following story. I left the town where I had been a student to join the underground resistance movement. After several months, I received news of home. I learned that my mother had been killed at point blank range by a French soldier, and two of my sisters taken to the barracks. To this day, I don't know where they are. I was terribly shaken by my mother's death. My father had died some years back. I was the only man in the family, and my sole ambition had always been to do something to make life easier for my mother and sisters. One day, we went to a large estate owned by white settlers where the manager, a notorious colonial, had already killed two Algerian civilians. It was night when we arrived at his house, but he wasn't at home. Only his wife was in the house. On seeing us, she begged us not to kill her. I know you have come for my husband, she said, but he isn't here. How many times have I told him not to get mixed up in politics? We decided to wait for the husband. But I kept looking at the woman and thinking of my mother. She was sitting in an armchair and her thoughts seemed to be elsewhere. I was asking myself, why didn't we kill her? And then she noticed I was looking at her. She threw herself on me, screaming, please don't kill me. I've got children. The next minute, she was dead. I killed her with my knife. My commander disarmed me and gave me orders to leave. I was interrogated by the district commander a few days later. I thought I was going to be shot, but I didn't give a damn. And then I began to vomit after eating and I slept badly. After that, this woman would come every night asking for my blood. And what about my mother's blood? As soon as the patient went to bed at night, the room was invaded by women, all the same. It was the same woman duplicated over and over again. They had all had a gaping hole in their stomachs. They were bloodless, sickly pale, and terribly thin. The women tormented the young man and demanded their blood back. At that moment, the sound of rushing water filled the room and grew so loud it seemed like a thundering waterfall. And the young patient saw the floor of his room soaked in blood, his blood, while the women slowly got their color back and their wounds began to close. Soaked in sweat and filled with anxiety, the patient would wake up and remain agitated until dawn. The young patient had been treated now for several weeks, and the nightmare symptoms have virtually disappeared. His personality, however, remains seriously flawed. As soon as he thinks of his mother, the disemboweled woman looms up disconcertingly in her place. As unscientific as it may seem, we believe only time may heal the dislocated personality of this young man. Case number 4. A European police officer suffering from depression while at the hospital meets one of his victims, an Algerian patriot suffering from stupor.
Hey, comrade, can I have you pause a second?
Sure.
I just want to do a quick temperature check of the room, because if I was doing a therapy group with people that have dealt with trauma, I wouldn't want to just plow through all of these cases without first checking in to see where people were in terms of their anxiety levels, without going into any unnecessary detail about your personal issues. Is anybody feeling particularly escalated anxiety just upon hearing these cases? I'm just curious just to hear first impressions, just brief first impressions from everybody.
I'm not really feeling any heightened anxiety from this. I'm just saddened, and I'm just saddened and disgusted by all the shit that these people have gone through. It's fucking saddening, you know?
Same, yeah.
You're mute.
But what about how the women doing?
The brutality against women being described here is quite fucking unsettling.
Indeed.
And especially for I've been raped before, so reading about that part is not fucking easy.
Right.
It's fucked up, but he's giving an honest description of the shit that he witnessed there and is being told by his patients. So I understand he's trying to help people cope with those things there, but
Right.
It is very unsettling to read.
And you know, for a lot of people that have been through things like this, you know, just reading these graphic stories can be somewhat triggering. So I just wanted to kind of like pace it a little bit. These stories are similar to stories that I heard when I was working with families that had been through the Central American revolutions. When I was working at Children's Institute in MacArthur Park, a lot of our clients were Salvadorian, and a lot of times it was these kind of experiences, or just like images of dead bodies or the death of loved ones that people couldn't quite get out of their minds. And sometimes they would a lot of times drink to get rid of the images. Sometimes they would experience a disassociation. With just a quick primer on PTSD, the brain stem of every mammal is designed to generate 3 responses in response to a sudden terror: fight, flight, or freeze. An animal on the trail that sees a predator up ahead has to make a split-second decision. Am I strong enough to fight, fast enough to flee, or do I freeze and hope it doesn't see me? And the third option, freeze, is the more complex of the 3 coping mechanisms, because in some ways it can lead to a sort of mental disassociation where a person can black out. And the upside of that, it allows people to withstand torture sometimes, to black out and go somewhere else entirely in their own depths of their own mind. But sometimes people can get stuck there, in the same way that people can get stuck in fight mode or flight mode. Like with a couple of these patients, it seems like they were almost stuck in fight mode to the degree that they were having violent ideation of even their own comrades because of the things they'd experienced.
Yeah, it just, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, that dude that was saying how he thought everyone and everything was out to kill him, that was scary as fuck. Like imagine feeling imagine being in fight mode, so in a such aggressive and in a such aggressive state that you think anything and everyone is out to kill you, and that even your own comrades are the enemy. They even your own comrades are somehow disguised as the French, and that that they're coming to kill you. That's fucking scary. And what were we talking about? We were talking about the freezing part.
Mm-hmm.
It also goes in tandem, I believe, with like, when someone goes somewhere else where they kind of like regress mentally. We're like the kind of they kind of regress, and they kind of act like a child or like a baby in order to better cope with trauma. I've met people and seen people who have acted that way, where they've been triggered and they go into like baby mode. So yeah.
Did anybody else have anything they wanted to process about this before we continue with the text?
I can say that this is the first time that I've actually read a part of the book, and reading these stories, these stories about colonized people that have been completely psychologically destroyed by the presence of the French people, by the presence of French colonialism, which is still happening. It's disheartening, it's sickening, it's abhorrent, but this is the reality. This is what happened. This is what happened, and this is what is still happening. This is still happening in occupied Palestine. This is still happening in Arabia. This is still happening in my homeland of Africa. This is still happening in Venezuela. This is still happening in Brazil, and it's still in Burkina Faso, and Niger, and Senegal, and Mali. It's still happening, and especially with the French colonization of modern day Algeria is so severe and so psychologically depleting and damaging and so violent. And a lot of the political migrants from Algeria and France, they are still facing the exact same thing. And they cast France as being this amazing place with the Eiffel Tower, even though they have destroyed Haiti, they have destroyed the modern day Dominican Republic, they destroyed the land of Quisqueya, they have ruined Algeria. They have ruined many places of Africa, including the indigenous Congo Angola Basin and the indigenous peoples that occupy the basin, including the Bakongo people, which many new Africans have descent of some form from. You know, this is still happening, and we have to hear these stories as much as it's triggering, as much as it is frightening and sickening. This is the reality. It happened back then and it's still happening now. And we have to confront this type of history. These are people. These are colonized people that have been violated, that have been killed, that have been psychologically destroyed once again. And we have to confront it, because if we don't, then this will continue. And the stories like this will continue to become reality for other colonized children and youth in Congo, Angola, in Palestine, in Haiti, and other places that the colonizers still have under siege.
Yep.
And in one way of looking at some of this content, for some people can perceive it as triggering, but another way to look at it is it's stress inoculation training. We're hearing about some of the worst outcomes of a revolutionary war, and this is the shit that happens in a war. But as we're reading it and kind of holding each other in the midst of this, and we're going to be stronger just from going through it. And PTSD is weird because it often affects people after they leave the situation. A lot of times people will be fine while they're not fine, but a lot of times they'll hold it in until they're out of the dangerous situation. And then a lot of times, and they think they're okay, but then a lot of times that's when the symptoms come, once they're kind of relaxing. I see that a lot with some of my unhoused comrades. They're holding in so much trauma that as soon as they get housed and they have their own bed and a roof over their head, it's like all of a sudden a whole new set of symptoms kind of starts. And sometimes it's the shame of that, like, will people perceive me as weak, that cause them to hold it in. And so it's really important that we have circles of care within, you know, to help people like through this, because this is part of the war too, is help each other through this kind of stress and distress.
Exactly.
Are y'all ready? Y'all ready to move on then?
Oh yeah. Also, I just wanted to say, I thought each one of us were reading 3 pages. I wanted to comment on it, but I didn't want to interrupt. Bow's like, I'm pretty sure Comrade Rod read more than 3 pages.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Does anybody else want to jump on and read?
Yeah. I volunteer.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Also, before you start, I didn't know what all was being discussed in these cases when we were talking about where to stop before we, hit the record button. And I think we should actually read through case number 5 as well, and at least finish up these psychological analysis cases here that he's presenting before we go into discussion.
100%.
Sean, do you have the mic?
I have it. Okay.
Yep.
Here we go. Case number 4. A European police officer suffering from depression while at the hospital meets one of his victims, an Algerian patriot suffering from stupor. A, 28 years old, married without children. We have learned that he and his wife have been undergoing treatment for several years to try and have children. He has referred to us by his superiors because of his behavioral problems. The immediate report proved to be fairly good. The patient spoke to us spontaneously about his problems, on good terms with his wife and parents-in-law, good relations with his colleagues at work, and well thought of by his superiors. What troubled him was having difficulty sleeping at night because he kept hearing screams. In fact, he told us that for the last few weeks before going to bed, he closes all the shutters and stops up the windows. It is summer, to the utter despair of his wife, who is suffocating from the heat. He also stuffs cotton in his ears so as to muffle the screams. Sometimes in the middle of the night, he switches on the radio or puts on some music so as not to hear the nightly din. He consequently explained to us his tribulations in great detail. A few months ago, he was transferred to an anti-FLN brigade. To begin with, he was assigned to watching a few buildings and cafes. But after a few weeks, he was working almost full-time at the police headquarters. That was where he came to be involved in interrogations, which always implied some form of quote unquote roughing up. The thing is, they never wanted to confess anything. Sometimes, he went on to explain, you feel like telling them that if they had any consideration for us, they'd cough up and not force us to spend hours on end squeezing the information out of them word by word. But you might as well talk to the wall. Every question gets the answer, I don't know. Even when we ask for their names, if we ask them where they live, they answer, I don't know. So of course we had to give them the works, but they screamed too much. At first it made me laugh, but then it began to unnerve me. Today, I can tell just which stage the interrogation has reached by the sound of the screams. The guy who has been punched twice and given a blow behind the ear has a certain way of talking, screaming, and saying that he is innocent. After he had been hanging by his wrist for 2 hours, his voice changes. After the bathtub, a different voice, and so on. But it's after the electricity that it becomes unbearable. You'd think he was going to die at any moment. Of course, there are those who don't scream. Those are the hardliners. But they imagine we are going to kill them immediately. But we're not interested in killing them. What we want is information. We first try and get them to scream, and sooner or later they give in. That's already a victory. Then we continue. Mind you, we prefer not to. But they don't make things easy for us. Now I can hear those screams even at home, especially the screams of the ones who died at the police headquarters. Doctor, I'm sick of this job. If you can cure me, I'll request a transfer to France. If they refuse, I'll resign. Under the circumstances, I put him on sick leave. Since he refused to be admitted to hospital, I treated him as a private patient. One day, just before our session was due to begin, I was called back to the ward for an emergency. When he arrived at my house, my wife told A he could wait, but he said he preferred to go for a walk in the hospital grounds, thinking he might find me there. A few minutes later, on my way back home, I found him leaning against a tree, covered in sweat and having a panic attack. I put him in the car and drove home. Once we had settled him on the sofa, he told me he had encountered one of my patients, an Algerian patriot who had been tortured at police headquarters and who was being treated for post-traumatic stress. I then learned that this police officer had been actively involved in torturing this patient. I gave him some sedatives, which calmed his anxiety. After he had left, I visited the ward where the Algerian was being treated. The staff hadn't noticed anything. The patient, however, was nowhere to be found. We eventually discovered him hiding in a bathroom where he was trying to commit suicide. The patient had recognized the police officer and was convinced he had come looking for him to take him back to police headquarters. A came back to see me several times, and after his condition improved rapidly, he was eventually reprimanded on medical grounds. As for the Algerian patriot, it took a long time for the staff to convince him that he had been deluding himself, that policemen were not allowed inside the hospital, that he was tired and he was here to be cared for, etc. Keep going?
Sure. You're
Okay.
doing great.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Case number 5. A European police inspector tortures his wife and children. R, 30 years old, referred himself to us of his own free will. He is a police inspector who for some weeks realized that something was wrong. Married with 3 children, smokes a lot, 3 packs a day. He has lost his appetite and his sleep is disturbed by nightmares. These nightmares have no particular distinguishing features. What bothers him most is what he calls his quote unquote fits of madness. First of all, he does not like to be contradicted. Doctor, tell me why as soon as someone confronts me, I feel like hitting him. Even outside work, I feel like punching the guy who gets in my way for nothing at all. Take, for example, when I go to buy the paper, there's a line, so you have to wait. I hold out my hand to take the paper. The guy who runs the newsstand is an old friend of mine, and someone in the line calls out aggressively, "Wait your turn." Well, I feel like beating him up, and I would tell myself, if I could get you, pal, for a few hours, you wouldn't mess with me. He can't put up with noise. At home, he has a constant desire to give everyone a beating, and he violently assaults his children, even his 20-month-old baby. But what frightened him was one evening when his wife had bitterly protested he was being too hard on the children. She even said to him, "For goodness sake, you're crazy." He turned on her, beat her, and tied her to a chair, shouting, "I'm going to teach you once and for all who's the boss around here." Fortunately, his children began to cry and scream. He then realized the full gravity of his behavior, untied his wife, and the next morning decided to consult a nerve specialist. He had never been like that, he says. He seldom punished his children and never quarreled with his wife. The present problem that occurs since the Troubles. The fact is, he said, we're now being used as foot soldiers. Last week, for example, we operated as if we were in the army. Those guys in the government says there's no war in Algeria, and the police force must realize law and order. But there is a war in Algeria. And when they realize it, it'll be too late. The thing that gets me the most is the torture. Does that mean anything to you? Sometimes I torture for 10 hours straight. How does torturing make you feel? It wears you out, of course. It's true we take turns, but the question is knowing to let your colleague have a go. Everyone thinks he's just about to get the information and is careful not to hand over the customer all nice and ready for the other guy to take all the glory. So sometimes we hand him over and sometimes we don't. We even offer the guy money, our own pocket money, to get him to squeal. Our problem is, are we able to get the guy to talk? It's a matter of personal success. We're sort of competing. We actually messed up our fists, so we brought in the Senegalese. But they either hit too hard or hit the guy in 30 minutes, or not enough and nothing happens. In fact, you need to use your head in this kind of work. You need to know when to tighten your grip and when to loosen it. You have to have a feel for it. When the guy is ripe, there's no point continuing to hit him. That's why it's best to do your own work. You can judge better how you're doing. I'm against those who get others to work the guy over and then pop in every so often to see how he's doing. The golden rule is never give the guy the impression he won't get out alive. He'll then wonder what's the use of talking if it won't save his life. In that case, you'll have no choice at all of getting anything out of him. He has to go on hoping. It's hope that makes them talk. But what bothers me most is this business with my wife. I must have a screw loose somewhere. You've got to straighten me out, doctor. Since his administration refused to give him a sick leave and the patient did not wish for certification from a psychiatrist, we treated him while on duty. It is easy to imagine the disadvantages of such a procedure. This man knew perfectly that all his problems stemmed directly from the type of work conducted in the interrogation rooms, though he tried to blame everything on the troubles. As he had no intention of giving up his job as a torturer, this would make no sense since he would then have to resign. He asked me in plain language to help him torture Algerian patriots without having a guilty conscience, without any behavior problems, and with a total peace of mind.
Right. Do you guys
Wow.
want to stop here or do you want to read series B? Your choice. We're about an hour in, I think.
We can pass it on to someone else.
If y'all are okay with it, I could read case 1 and we can stop there.
Well, give me a second to scan through and see how many cases are in series B here, how long that would be to read for oh wow, there's a series C too. So I guess let's take
There's
a look.
34 pages to the chapter.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe we should stop here and we can pick up with the series B of the case studies next week.
Oh, 100%, yeah,
'Cause we
that'd be good.
definitely do have a lot to analyze already here with this.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense.
and I'll leave this page open on my laptop so we pick back up at the same spot next week.
That was a good reading, man. There's so much to talk about with what we read.
Yeah, good Lord, this shit's fucking intense. I mean,
It is.
to see not just the psychological damage done to the victims, but the psychological damage it's also doing to the people who their job is to be the torturers. It's fucked all the way around.
Yeah,
Yep.
This colonialism has affected everybody. There, these cops and whatnot who are Algerians. This is a prime example of neo-colonialism. Of okay, you're taking over, doing the harm that the French were doing. Well, now we're passing the buck to you. It's your job to harm your own people now, and you know it's
Exactly.
no wonder everybody's fucked in the head after these experiences.
exactly. And that's the entire point. It's psychological warfare.
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially what it is. We have been colonized by the Spaniards, by the Portuguese, by the Italians, by the French, by the English, and other European nations for so long that with neocolonialism, it's now colonized people themselves that are taking over the torch of their oppressor. And it's causing more destruction, especially mentally and psychologically to us than many of us, especially here in the global north, in the West, tend to really realize. Because once again, this is all psychological genocide as well.
I'm thinking of police forces around the country as well as correction officers.
Yep, because they get mind fucked in conditions to do this kind of harm to their own communities too.
Exactly.
Reminds me.
There's a lot of cops who completely have lost their humanity and have been so consumed by the trauma of what they've done that it's just become almost part of their identity. One thing I would really like to see in the health of my comrades is that I would like to ultimately see a revolutionary cadre that can be martially effective without losing our sense of humanity, and that partially comes from being able to retain a sense of humanity for our enemies too. I'm thinking about that story where they were waiting for the woman's husband, and the guy just kind of impulsively killed wife and head. And there's studying the Civil War. My ancestors fought. It was a very bloody war. Some units that had captains that were pretty sensitive to this thing, or that had been through their own trauma, they were able to really kind of like go through stress inoculation protocols where they were really able to prepare themselves mentally beforehand. So they didn't end up doing any weird impulsive battlefield shit, that were very disciplined.
Yeah.
And kind of mentally prepared going in. That some of the regiments that weren't really mentally prepared, the ones that were more likely to crumble under pressure and just get slaughtered. Half that really is mental.
Yeah. This shit's heavy. This shit's really heavy. I mean, it's diving into the complexities of, these torturers then torturing themselves internally, like their subconscious, their brains are being complete assholes to themselves for the things that they have willingly done to other people. And it's astounding in that last case of, the guy not even being willing to quit his job or even be put on medical leave with a note from a psychiatrist. He's that dead set on keeping his fucking job as a torturer, even though his subconscious knows how fucked up he is for doing these things to other people. And his subconscious is torturing him the same kind of fucking ways. And even his own sense of self-preservation hasn't kicked in to go, you know what, maybe you're being fucked up and you should stop doing this, because until you do, we're going to torture ourselves.
Yep.
Like when your subconscious confronts you with these things, the whole fucking point of it is for you to have some time of self-criticism and to understand where you are fucking up and what you need to quit doing if you would like to actually heal and grow from there. And he's absolutely refusing to. So he's choosing to wallow in his own misery there and cling to it as if it is incremental to his survival in those circumstances. And probably because of, maybe some underlying thought of, if I stop being the torturer, will I become the tortured?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that's something similar. With what you just said, Sister Zen, that kind of correlates a little bit to how some white people are afraid that if they stop colonizing and oppressing non-white people, that they know that they're afraid that they'll be oppressed themselves. So yeah, that's also very, very interesting that also seen. Where white people, where there are white people who are downright afraid of the idea of, if I stop colonizing, if I stop enslaving, if I stop exploiting, oppressing, subjugating, killing Black people, Indigenous people, Asian people, and so on and so forth, that they'll start killing, oppressing, and subjugating me.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting.
You literally see it in their reactionary ass fucking things that they publish, these white supremacist
We're the victims.
Like, for example, in SC-131, they are quite public, quite vocal about trying to claim some kind of victim card, as if they are being oppressed for being white, quote unquote, patriotic men, and it's like, Jesus fucking Christ, guy. And all it really is they're desperately seeking to hang on to this level of control and dominance that they never fucking earned and never fucking deserved. And it's a fear of, and it goes hand in hand with their fear about the quote unquote white birth rate dropping and stuff too. Because they are afraid of being outnumbered. They're afraid of becoming a minority. They're afraid of being treated the way they've treated everybody else. And this applies to every facet of bigotry. You know, when it comes down to the ones who are chauvinists, that are misogynistic and homophobic, they, a lot of times, you know, you'll see these guys get totally reactionary because a gay man hits on them. And it's like, what, are you afraid that they're going to treat you the way you treat women, you bitch motherfucker? You know, it applies to every facet of bigotry. It all comes down to fear of being the one in the minority, being the one who is subjugated, being the one who is getting abused. And so they cling to desperately having being the abuser as like a core part of their personality and how they exist.
Yep.
And it's fucked.
Related as well.
This chapter and this chapter and these therapy sessions with these people, both colonized and colonizer, people being affected by this colonial white supremacist system, you know, it kind of just goes over and over again how important mental health is. You know, like how essential is that we check ourselves and then we make sure that we're doing okay and that we're all right. Because for the majority of because I've said this before, out of all the contradictions that are rarely talked about when it comes to capitalism, out of all the contradictions that are discussed about in Marxist circles, the one that is rarely talked about ever is ableism. Ableism is rarely talked about when it comes to how it affects us, how it affects our mental health, and how to combat it. You know, we have to combat all contradictions of capitalism. We have to combat all forms of oppression that derive and that take root from this capitalist system if we are going to fully and truly achieve cultural, economic, and social liberation and uphold the revolutionary proletarian line. And this kind of shows us how important mental health is, that we check ourselves. So yeah,
all the systems need to go. They all need to go. You cannot be capitalist and keep one faction of it. It doesn't work. It doesn't work like that.
Yep.
Because this is all a class struggle that we're talking about. Not just money alone.
Exactly.
It's not just rich, poor alone.
It's everything.
It's the social and the cultural and the physical made political.
Yep. Literally. It's all interconnected. Everything is interconnected. It's not just racial oppression. It's not just misogyny. It's not just ableism. It's not just money. It's everything. Everything. Economically, socially, culturally, the superstructure. It all has to go. It all needs to be uprooted and replaced with a new socioeconomic system, with a new mode of production, with a new way of life, with a new culture, with a new everything. If we're going to truly, achieve a proletarian state and move forward, you know. So yeah, I really just love this chapter, and I really just love how it's delving into how this colonial white supremacist system, how it fucks with you psychologically, and how it affects not just colonized people, but colonizer people. Because when you go into the states, when you go into the military, when you go into the police system, the thing that they want is to break you down and transform you into a fucking puppet. That's what they want. They want to break you down. Sorry, what?
They want to transform you into a fascist.
Yep,
Yes.
literally, they want to transform you into a fascist. They want to break you down
Yeah,
from the ground up, restructure your mind, and make you think like a white supremacist. That these people aren't human beings. That they're just that they're quote unquote subhuman. That what they're doing is right. That they're the ones that they're truly oppressed. They're trying to make you into a fucking fascist white supremacist piece of shit. That's what they want.
exactly.
So yeah.
That's what they want, and especially with the Boricua that was placed as superintendent for the fascist NYPD, which is an agent of New York City, which is also an agent of the U.S. Empire, essentially annihilating the Boricua people even further and annihilating Borinquen even further. The efforts of assimilating and essentially being part of the oppressor, essentially becoming the part of the oppressors, including Eric Adams, who is a full-blown fascist.
Yep.
A prime example that representation in the white supremacist sense is genocide, because we are giving up our history and our identity and our destiny and our culture and our history to become part of our oppressor, to become English people, to become the French people, to become the Italians, to become the Spaniards, to become the Portuguese, to become them, to become the same people that murdered 15 million indigenous Africans of our ancestral kin back home for our rubber, to make tires, to take our cobalt, to take our gold, to take our coffee, our resources that have made Africa what it was. Because mind you, we already were developed. My ancestors were already developed. We were doing just like the native people of this continent were. We were the same people. We had the same infrastructures just like they had the same infrastructures. We already have all these. We already knew who we were. We knew who we were. So when they say that, that we need help, we do not need help. We don't need help. The help that we've been getting killed millions of us. Slaves, 2.3 million of us. That is not a flaw. Please do not get it misled. Please do not let anyone mislead you with that. Because 12.3 million people being enslaved from their indigenous homelands in Africa and being brought here, that was not a flaw. That was not a flaw. And when they need more colonized spaces in the faction of fascism and white supremacy and imperialism, etc., we are essentially giving them more ammunition to kill more of us and to torture even more people, including colonizer people, including those people. Because once again, we've been saying this for years. We've been saying this for years, that just because they are a colonizer does not mean that they will be protected either.
Yep.
Right. We've been telling them this. We as colonized trans people have been saying this for years, that cis people will not be protected either. We have had 3 cases of cis people in the past month being killed because they've been thought that they've been perceived as being a trans person, or that they have been standing on the side of trans people as us trans people. They're not protected either. That's the entire, it's a psychological warfare in order to have more people in their factions and then kill them off when they're done with them so they can get more. That's what we've been saying. And so when it comes to that, we are essentially saying that, they do not care if you're from Europe, if you're from the islands, if you're from the indigenous Caribbean islands. They don't care if you're a Nawa person. They don't care if you're a Mexica or Ibo or Yoruba or Native Hawaiian. It doesn't matter, because it's all about power. It's all about control. It's all about upkeeping the colonialist and capitalist systems intact. And they will do anything and everything and everything to upkeep it, to get people to uphold to its concepts, to uphold to its systems, to uphold to its complexes. The gender binary, the public school indoctrination complex, the prison neo-slavery complex. They need these concepts in order to survive itself. And they need enough loyal people, enough docile people, enough brainwashed people in order to upkeep with it and then just drop it them when they're done with them. That's literally what they do. That's literally how they work. That's how it's always been for 531 years. 531 years of this, since this has started. It's all about power and control at the end of the day. They do not care if you're colonized or colonizer. It doesn't matter, because it's all about control, and they will do anything to uphold it.
Exactly. Beautifully
That's why
said,
they
Comrade
left
Shanti.
us-
Preach. I fucking love that. Everything.
It's true.
You hit so many nails on the head there that I literally have a list of things here. It's like, in order for colonization and capitalism to really be able to take that foothold, it depends on that forced assimilation in every fucking manner of not just erasing your ties to your land and your resources and claiming them as its own because they successfully invaded, but erasing any sense of who you are, all the way down to the psychology there behind these facets that uphold capitalism. And I know I bring this one up often. I'm going to bring it up again because she was fucking right. But Bell Hooks in the book Killing Rage, Ending Racism so eloquently described this system. She termed it white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, because you cannot fucking separate any of those facets. Capitalism depends on racism and sexism and homophobia and all those other things actually exist, because that forced I can't fucking talk. The forced assimilation into this psychological framework of divisiveness is part of that control factor that allows the system to really take root, because it distracts people away from confronting the system itself, because they're too busy fighting with each other over stupid shit of, oh my God, you exist differently than I do, you need to die.
They just find it, they blame the wrong people. They blame the wrong people, and they blame the wrong systems outside of colonialism and capitalism for why we're in these conditions in the first place, why we are willfully still in these conditions, and why we are still self-destructing as colonized people, and even colonizers as well, because they're the ones involved in this too. It's not just.
Hello?
Did I lose audio?
No, yeah,
everything cut out for a moment.
For a second there, for a second there, I thought, wait, did I just disconnect? Oh my God! Don't tell me.
I literally checked my hotspot, like, oh fuck, did I lose signal from the heat again?
Oh my God.
But no, yeah. What were you saying, Comrade Shanti? You had so many nails, and you are 100% correct, because every single one of these contradictions, they are all intertwined, because all of them come back to the same thing: upholding profit. Right? It all comes back to upholding profit, maximizing the accumulation of surplus value of resources, and doing everything and anything to keep the masses divided. That's the whole point. That's
literally what happened.
Yes, that's the whole point of capitalism.
That's exactly what happened. And when you look at the Rainbow Coalition, what they did to the Rainbow Coalition, what they did to the New Africans, what they did to the Chicanos, what they did to the Boricuas, killing them left and right, neutralizing them left and right, making them become quote unquote Black, making them quote unquote American, in quote, descendants of slavery, making them foundational Americans, making them Mexican American, making them Hispanic, making them Latino. These are foreign labels that we have been assimilated into to supposedly get a chance of getting some kind of acceptance from our oppressor, to get some acceptance from the same system that colonized millions of our ancestors, and tried to kill every single Native person off this continent and in the islands. It literally goes back to all of that. It's literally that simple. It's that simple to understand. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's that simple to understand. They rely on drug addiction, on substance use disorder in order to survive. They have to make something in order to make it reality, to keep the youth docile, to keep the youth psychologically enslaved and sick. They have to keep them sick in order for it to transform itself with every generation of children and youth coming up. They rely on the war on drugs in order to survive itself. They rely on alcoholism. They rely on intercommunal gun violence in order to continue itself. And the funny thing is, with gun violence, they blame the gun itself for why, there's, so many, there's still so many youth dying and being, their lives literally changing because of gun violence. It's not the guns alone, because we know why we have gun violence in the first place. It's racial oppression. It's racialized oppression. It's capitalism. They're two of the same system. It's that simple. But we have these bougie figures. We have these petite bougie figures. We have these ruling class figures that we give our so-called wealth to every single day, every single hour, every single minute of our lives under this system, under this global system, that always tend to put the blame on the youth, to put the blame on us. And even though we did not create any of this, we do allow it because we don't have that principle. We don't have those structures anymore. We don't have those structures. They have been completely destroyed. And the descendants of the people of the original Rainbow Coalition are still alive. Chacha Jimenez, the founder of the Young Lords here in Chicago, the one that started it all, he turned 75 today, and he's still alive. His children are still alive. The women of the Young Lords are still alive. Fred's son is still alive. I believe Fred Jr.'s mother is still alive.
Yep.
John Peltier.
Leonard
Peltier. Sorry.
It didn't happen 2,000 years ago. This happened like 5 decades ago. And we're still going through it. And this is literally what we have been saying forever. We've been saying this forever. But we're the problem. We're always the problem. It's always our fault. We're to blame for this. Oh, woe is me. Woe is us. Woe is us. Not understanding that these are the systems that they willfully participate in that are killing them and will drop them on the corner of a street if they need to.
Yep. It's all about power. It's all about profit. It's all about doing it. And it's all about the maximization of profit in the quickest and most efficient way possible. That's it. If they need to drop you in order to maximize profit, they'll do it. If they need to kill you to make more money, they'll do it. If they need to get your entire fucking neighborhood addicted to crack in order to make more profit, they'll do it. They'll do anything and everything to make more money. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter who you are.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And the thing about the crack crisis
was that this was when Reagan, of all people, became president. He destroyed every single community. He came through, including George Sr., including Clinton, and all presidents really. But Reagan was the one that really kicked it into higher gear with the crack crisis, especially. It almost killed almost every poor and homeless new African in the urban cities in Chicago. You've seen it in Chicago. You've seen it in New York. You've seen it in Philly. You've seen it in LA. You've seen it in Houston, Miami, St. Louis, Milwaukee, Minneapolis. Like, it was everywhere. It was everywhere. And it was devastating enough that it was literally like an atomic bomb went off. That's literally what it was. And they have profited so much from it. They have profited so much from our escapist complex that they have created, because they have to create poverty and create homelessness in order for the escapist complex to be formed so that they can be able to prey on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally a cycle. It's that simple. It's that simple. And Reagan was the one, like I said, to really kick it into high gear. I mean, took out all of the arts programs in the high schools, the crack crisis, war in Iraq, when they did nothing. But
Literally,
it's about power. It's about power. It's about power. And we have been saying this. We have been saying this for years. And too many docile people do not want to listen to us until it happens to them.
Yep.
Look at where we are now. Because no one wants to talk. No one wants to listen. There is distrust. There is resentment. There is fear. There is escapism. There is doomism. And capitalism will prey on it in any way, shape, or form they can, in order to keep us so divided and so isolated from other colonized people's struggles, from our own struggle, and to keep us from even organizing to fight back against our real enemy, because once again, they're in this too.
Yep. As Fred Hampton said, this isn't a race struggle, this is a class
struggle.
Class. It's a class struggle. Everything is related to class. Race is related to class. Queerphobia is related to class. Ableism is related to class. Everything comes back to the primary contradiction of capitalism. Wage slavery. Everything comes back to it. Everything comes back to
literally
the class
what
distinction.
Yeah.
Yep, literally. It all comes back to it. It all comes fucking back to it. This isn't white versus black. This isn't queer versus cishet. This isn't neurodivergent versus neurotypical. This is the working class versus the bourgeois. This is the people versus a small group of individuals who are destroying life on fucking Earth just to make more fucking money. That's what enemy is. That's what fucking enemy is.
We have been saying this. The indigenous people of this continent have been saying this for years. The Mayans it. The Mexica has been saying it. The Guna has been saying it. The indigenous people of modern day Brazil have been saying this. We've been said this.
Mm-hmm.
We've been said it.
Rob, I saw you had your hand up. I'm curious what analysis you have of this. Let us pick your brain.
Yeah.
Hell
yeah.
I have people waiting on me. I'm gonna have to get ready and go. But I just, if anything, I just wanted to remind everybody to check in with yourselves and nurture some goodness within yourselves this week. In a world that's as bleak as it is, down ecocide, capitalism-driven ecocide, it's easy to kind of forget our own humanity and to become completely bored from why we're fighting in the first place. What the point of having a revolution, you know. And it's really important to nurture in our minds the vision of what life might look like after revolution is stabilized.
Mhm.
And once there is once there is a dictatorship of the proletariat, what that might look like, it's important to kind of to nurture that vision, because that's ultimately what gets us through. And I'm, you know, I like I said earlier, I believe in training for the fight. But it's also really important to, you know, as the enemy has tried to strip so many of us of our humanity by propaganda, by physical aggression, you know, it's sometimes easy to relinquish our own sense of humanity. And it's really important to be able to anchor ourselves to something that's every week to that which is true, good, and beautiful. I mean, I'm kind of like Leon Plato there, but yeah, the beautiful, the true, and the good, as like a point of reference. And ultimately, that's what keeps us from becoming reactionary. Because the reactionary is just acting against that which is set in front of them. But the visionary revolutionary is acting from a broader sense of love that transcends even our own generation, a love for the following generation that might reap the benefits of our own blood, sweat, and tears, you know? And so, yeah, that's what I want to leave people with. Find some space this week to nurture that vision within yourself.
Hell yeah. Beautifully fucking said, comrade. I've said this before. You know, when it comes to us revolutionaries, we oftentimes are influenced by two feelings: love and hatred. You know, love for the people and the masses, and hatred for the enemy and the oppressor and white supremacists. I fucking despise white supremacists. I loathe this fucking socioeconomic system, and I fucking absolutely find it abhorrent the way things are, and despise the enemy. But that hatred will never surpass the love that I have for you guys. You know, and that's something that I think we all have to keep in mind. You know, you know, I've said before, socialism is authoritarian, but it's authoritarian to the oppressor, not to the oppressed. You know, we have to, when it comes to revolutionaries, you know, we're guided by hatred for the enemy in front of us, but we should be guided more so by the love for the comrades that are beside us, that we're fighting together, arm to arm alongside to move class struggle forward. You know, so whenever I think of this fucking horrible fucking socioeconomic system, whenever I think of the shit these white supremacists, these bourgeois fucks have done to the world, all to maximize profit, I also always think of you guys and of the people in the masses, and it makes me happy knowing the possibility that there is something better, and thinking of the people that I love, thinking of my comrades. You know, it always brings me back to seeing how things could be better. So yeah.
Right. It's one of those things we definitely have to be mindful of. And especially because if we let our energy focus on, don't get me wrong, the very legitimate hatred towards this system and towards white supremacy, towards all of its neighboring facets there of bigotry, that sense of anger is absolutely fucking justified and valid. However, if that is where our mindset and our energy is constantly focused, we are going to drive ourselves into anxiety and fucking depression. So I'm thankful Dr. Rob pointed that out, of like, please be sure to take the time to focus your energy on envisioning what the world is going to be like once we are successful here. To keep in mind that it is out of this pure love of life itself, of all of our comrades, of every living being on this planet, of the planet itself, that drives us to be mindful and focus our energy there, so that we can drive ourselves forward in a positive manner and remember what the fuck we are doing this for.
Right.
Because otherwise it's so easy to succumb to those feelings of anger and hatred, and we don't need to become the reactionaries. We don't react, we fucking respond.
And
And we
Exactly.
respond
do
with
so
principle.
because of, yes, Shanti, with
It's
principle.
principle.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't
Fuck
have
yes.
you can't have you
Principle
can't
is
have
the key word here.
yep. You can't have
Yep.
liberation without being principled.
Exactly. You
Yep.
really can't. And that's one thing that I find kind of frustrating when it comes to dealing with like this recent surge of cat socks and MAGA communists and shit. And I'm like, y'all still don't fucking get it yet. You need to fucking fix your stinking fucking thinking and move further left, because
Yeah.
you cannot achieve a economic revolution without also addressing racism, sexism, homophobia, the other factors that come into
Yep.
play with class.
Every single concept.
Yep.
Because
It's not
I've told a few of them, I've pissed them right the fuck off and been like, well, if you think that you're gonna fucking go against the system of just for a financial benefit to cishet white men's pockets, the rest of us are gonna sit here and enjoy our wine and popcorn and watch the shit show and be glad that there'll be less of you reactionaries and the fucking system's reactionaries for us to have to fight afterwards. Because you're
Yep.
fucked if you think you can actually achieve revolution that does not also liberate BIPOC, that does not liberate LGBTQ, that does not liberate women. Everybody who has been oppressed by this fucking system must be given equity.
Yep.
Without that, you are not doing anything
Yeah.
that is revolutionary. You are not liberating anybody. And we're not going to lay our lives on the line for, you know, just a taking over of the system to benefit cishet white men's pockets. We're going to put our lives on the line to uplift every fucking body out of the oppression that we have dealt with from this fucking system in every way, shape, and form. That's worthy of laying my life on the line for.
Fuck yeah, beautiful. You know, as a wise person once told me, freedom is only privilege extended unless it is enjoyed by one and all. If freedom is not
Right.
extended to every single human fucking being on this planet, it is fucking privilege. It is not freedom. If you cannot have economic liberation without having social liberation as well. You cannot have economic and social liberation without having cultural liberation as
Right.
well. It is all interconnected. You can't just fucking say you want one. You can't just say you want one with without the other. It's not just about it's not just about a new economic system. It's not just about a new social system. It's not just about a new culture. It's all three of them. It's everything. It's the entire fucking establishment. It's the entire superstructure and the base that needs to change. Everything needs to fucking change. It is not just through establishing a new socioeconomic system and a new relationship production. It's about combating racism. It's about combating sexism. It's about combating queer phobia. It's about combating ableism. It's about establishing a new revolutionary culture that combats these reactionary sentiments, that combats these contradictions of capitalism, that combats these fucking bourgeois thought, that combats individualistic behavior. It all comes back to profit. Without acknowledging that, without acknowledging how everything is interconnected within a socioeconomic white supremacist system, we are just going to fucking tap. We're gonna have one step forward, two steps back. You can't just fucking acknowledge one without acknowledging the other. It won't work. It can't work. You can't just. It's just so annoying whenever I try talking to revisionists or the Pat Sops about the shit, and they just don't get it. It's truly fucking infuriating because it all comes back to profit. Racism comes back to profit to enslave, siphon, and subjugate non-white people and siphon their resources and surplus value while keeping white people and non-white people divided. Queer phobia comes back to profit because guess what? To discourage other types of sexualities and genders, except for cisgender people and heterosexual people, it encourages people to continue to make babies, and more babies means more profit, and more profit means more capital. What else? Ableism. Ableism is related to profit as well, because if you are not as exploitable as a neurotypical person, as an able-bodied person, if you are not as exploitable, if you do not make profit in the same time frame as others, guess what? You're fucking thrown away. You're fucking thrown, fucking discouraged and left to rot. It all comes back to profit. Everything comes back to profit. They don't understand that. It's annoying as fuck.
Yeah, I've tried to explain to them those facets of like, your only value to this system is your fucking adjacency to capital.
Yep.
And it does not fucking care, you know? And that's something that I had to learn the fucking hard way, going from being, you know, one of those power-driven fucking people like, yeah, I'm gonna kick ass in college and get my doctorate and I'm gonna do all these fucking things. But guess what? Getting flung out of a fucking rolling truck head first into a tree brought all that to an end. And it took a minute for me to realize that my adjacency to capital was erased by spinal cord injury, and that I was no longer worth a fuck to this system. And that was one of the revolutionizing things, you know, to happen to my mind and go, what the fuck? This system is fucked. And it's sad that it took that to start to wake me the fuck up in my mid-20s.
Exactly.
Go ahead, Shanti.
They will lead you on and chew you up and spit you out. They will give you all the glitz and glamour of their world. And until something terrible happens to you, they will drop you quicker and will treat you just like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like before fucking my back up, I was getting pursued for recruitment left and fucking right. I mean, even going back into high school, so I was dual enrolled in high school and college from the age of 15, and I had military recruiters up my ass, offering me all kinds of huge signing bonuses and, you know, enlisting as an officer, because by the time I graduated high school, I also was, you know, like one semester shy of graduating with my first degree and things like that. Yeah. Like they got sick of me telling them no when they would show up to my high school, and they started showing up at my parents' front door wanting to fucking talk to me. Exactly. And they were just like, basically like, we don't know where Trisha's at. She shows up every couple of weeks to grab some shit, you know? So they couldn't even find me there. But it still pissed me off because, you know, they just saw me as a tool that, you know, they could try to seize and use for their fucking means, and I wasn't fucking interested. I was like, yeah, no, I want to actually help people. I'm not interested in being the boot. You know, even then I at least had that much fucking awareness and was like, no, y'all wouldn't like me if you actually got me in there, because I don't fucking take orders. Fuck you, I am ungovernable. But I will self-govern. Fuck you. But it's ridiculous to have gone from having everybody and their brother falling out of the woodwork, like, please come work for us, to then fucking my spine up and everybody being like, oh, you're a useless eater. And I'm like, oh, you're a Nazi. You know?
Yup.
It's sad that in this fucking day and age, we are seeing a rise in neo-Nazism, and I have seen so many people lately use that specific phrase of useless eaters about people who are disabled, and it's like, oh, so you're a piece of shit who thinks that your only value as a human being is how capable you are to produce profits for the fucking overlords and oppressors. Suck the dick I don't have, thank you.
Yup. The fucking the waste eaters. I think that's what they say, right? Is that right, son?
Useless eaters. It's a Nazi terminology for the disabled. Yep. Useless eaters.
Yeah, useless eaters, fucking white supremacists. That's basically just a new way of saying quote unquote undesirables.
Yeah,
basically,
it's
literally.
Untermenschen, which is German for subhuman.
Yep.
And they applied that term vastly. If you were not only just white, but a very specific flavor of white, of like the palest of pale, blonde hair, blue eyes, you were Untermenschen. If you were gay, you were Untermenschen. If you were disabled, you were Untermenschen. If any fucking thing that wasn't their delusional ideal of supreme being, you were Untermenschen, you were subhuman. And that's how they justified to themselves mass murder, genocide, slavery, the whole fucking 9 yards. And the ideology goes back a lot further than just the Nazis. They're just probably the most famous for having implemented it. But it goes back over 500 fucking years to when this concept of race was even created. Because prior to that, yes, there was certain facets of exploitation because most places were governed by monarchies and therefore had, you know, their subclasses of like your landlords and ladies, which is where landlording comes from, of like you were the lord of the land, you've been assigned this land by the monarchy, and all of the grunts that live there, you get to exploit their fucking labor. But capitalism came fully into being around the same time as this concept of race and dividing people by what shade of pigment your fucking skin produces. And was used as a pseudoscientific fucking, also, you know, religious baseline for subjugating people and deeming them less human in order to try to falsely justify to themselves the exploitation, the murder, the genocide, the slavery, the whole fucking 9 yards, because they needed a way to justify it to the church that was still in control of all governance. The Catholic Roman Church specifically, but you know, the Protestant Church of England also participated in this. But the biggest one they had to convince was the Roman Catholic diocese. And you know, because there's certain things where, you know, they were like, well, you know, you're not supposed to enslave people. And they were like, but hey, we decided that they're not really people anymore. So it's okay to do this, right? And the church was like, oh, fuck, you got me there. And it's all fucked. It's all fucked. These are all just insane, delusionary fucking ideals that people came up with. Like, you know, being able to pretend that somebody else is less human for some arbitrary facet of how we exist, which none of us have any control over or whatnot, you know, and for them to just be like, okay, you're subhuman now. It's really fucking disturbing that we still have such a lack of education about how people exist and a lack of empathy, that we are seeing another rise in fascism and in neo-Nazi ideology. And it's fucking disturbing. Like, what the fuck is wrong with these people to actually think?
It's reaching fever pitch.
Yeah, like how do they even justify it? You know, and I mean, so many of these fucking idiot white supremacists, they tried to claim racial superiority as if becoming white was an evolutionary step and not just acclimation to environment.
Literally.
And it's like, excuse me, you're only pale because of 3 genetic deformities. You're welcome. You're, you know.
Like hello. And what really gets me is that race does not naturally exist, but that's the point. It doesn't naturally exist. We were not calling ourselves white. We were not calling ourselves black. We were not calling ourselves, you know, yellow, red, brown. We did not operate like that. We never ever did. We never ever did. We never had those systems until colonization came about. The people, the indigenous peoples of so-called Melanesia, and I say so-called because the groupings of the Pacific Islands are by Europeans. So, but this is the only way that we can talk about, you know, what we can. The so-called Melanesians were the first ones to be classified as being Black because they came directly from Africa. So these people came directly from Africa, like straight from Africa, and they were the first ones until my ancestors to be classified as being Black because of our, you know, perceived traits, our biological traits. You know, race is caste and caste is class.
Yep.
And
Literally.
it's literally that. And even with when European immigrants came, when the Irish immigrants came, when especially the Irish immigrants, I mean, they were being treated the exact same way as new African people.
Yep.
Like exact same way. Like I mean, the stereotypes were very, very on par with us.
Yep.
And
Literally.
so they had to become, in order for it to supposedly stop, because it never stopped, they had to become quote unquote white. So they were no longer Irish. They were no longer Gaelic. They were now white.
You're English, quote unquote.
You're now English. And what a lot of people don't understand is that Ireland is a colonized land.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Sorry.
It became annexed to England, to what became the UK, because Ireland, Scotland, and Wales were annexed to England. So if you're talking about the UK, you're talking about England.
Yep, literally.
Because that's literally the main one, you know, that colonized, you know, almost the entire damn world. You know, it wasn't Ireland, Scotland, or Wales, even though some of those people did engage in it. They did. They did. And some of them still are. That's both truths can coexist. They don't have that power like England to really take over. And you know, there are a lot of Irish people, especially like in the arbitrary main part of Ireland, that have not assimilated, that are still resisting, that are still fighting the Republican Army. I know about the Republican Army. And you know, they're still fighting. And the arbitrary Northern Ireland, which is a loyal part to England, very, very loyal, acts just like them. Very, very fascist, very reactionary, very, very imperialist, against the Irish people. You know, like it's like it literally all goes back to that. Especially when the US was formed, you know, the European immigrants that were treated just like new Africans, just like the Filipinos, just like any other colonized person that built the US empire from the ground up. The Europeans were just a face. We made this off our genocide, okay? And like just like them, they were no longer Irish, they were no longer Scottish, they were no longer Italian, ironically. They were now white. They were now, and that
I find it. Sorry.
That's the race. Is that it's a control tactic to justify capital, to justify the oppression, and even with indigenous Africans, which makes up much of Africa's population anyway, since humanity did start from us, so it automatically counts. When we were colonized, when we were enslaved, when we were kidnapped, we lost our civilizations. Our indigenous names were removed. Mind you, we never had surnames. Until colonization, until we were kidnapped, and we were given English names, we were given Spaniard names, we were given Portuguese names, Italian names now. So it was no longer our own indigenous names. It was no longer Ibo names. It was no longer Yoruba names. It was no longer Bakongo names. We're now this Europeanized, subjugated, subhuman people. We were no longer indigenous. We were now Black, unquote. And especially when they talk about the native people of this continent, they essentially say that now that we're enslaved, that now that we were enslaved and taken from our homelands, we were no longer indigenous people, even though we still are. We're just politically displaced via genocide.
Yep.
You know, that's how New African came about. Is because many of the indigenous peoples resisted, and so it kind of formed this new heritage, this new identity that kind of merged everything together and made it into something new.
A new culture.
A new culture. And that was where New African came from, because it decenters our racial labels, Black, biracial, mixed, white passing, any, the quote unquote morally apt labels. It's it's a rejection of our foreign labels that have been placed on us, and a reclamation of our indigeneity and to our heritage and to our ancestors. And it's very important that the native people of this continent, as well, including millions upon millions of their descendants, recognize this and resist calling themselves mestizo, resist calling themselves Hispanic, resist calling themselves Latino, because they do not belong to Italy. Yep. They do not belong to Spain. They do not belong to France, and they do not belong to Portugal. They do not belong to the places where the Latin language is. They are not Latin people. They are not Europeans. Just because they now hold their blood does not mean that they came from Europe, because they were never from. They came from here. That's what literally what Chicano means. It's a reclamation of indigenous identity. It's a reclamation of indigenous pride. They think that is just Mexico. No. Chicano is the people and the land, not the state.
Mm-hmm.
There's a
beautifully fucking said. I fucking love everything. Shanti, you're awesome as hell. I fucking love you so much.
Because it's the truth. It's the truth.
It's the goddamn truth.
Everyone should know this. Everyone should know. Every single person.
I want to specifically talk. I want to specifically add on to what you were saying on Ireland, because not a lot of people know this. People don't know that before the British colonized Africa, they tested their playbook on the Irish. Literally. They tested it on the Irish, the Scottish. They literally called them quote unquote white gorillas, if I remember correctly. They were the first ones. They literally enslaved them. I've said this before, and I say it again. It pissed me off so fucking much how whenever a group faces racial oppression, one of the first responses that people in the U.S. have is, oh, but they have light skin. They can't face racial oppression. I've said before, and I'll say it again. Race is not just rooted within skin color. It is rooted in class. And if you're not part of the oppressive class, then you're not part of the same quote unquote race. That's the reason why historically the Irish, that's why historically the British never considered the Irish, Scottish, and Welsh to be white. That's why under Tsarist Russia, Jewish people, Ukrainians, Georgians,
indigenous Caucasians. The indigenous Caucasians, the real Caucasians, because they use Caucasian as a racial term.
Caucasian.
Because some guy went to the land of these people and called them, a gift from God, and made the modern racial hierarchy that we know of, that many of us fall under.
Yep,
The
he
killer
fucking
part
found
is
skulls
the Caucasus
attractive.
Mountains.
Yeah.
The
He
killer
fucking
part
found
is the
skulls.
Caucasus Mountains were mostly actually lived in by brown people. The Caucasus Mountains were settled by people coming north from West Asia. So we're talking India, Pakistan, Palestine, you know, moving northward and settling there. The original quote unquote Caucasus people were brown. And you know,
Yep.
yes, there's people from other parts of the world that settled there where if you were Caucasian, you could be of any color of the rainbow, but most of them were
Exactly.
brown.
Right.
The original quote unquote Aryans are Punjabi,
Yep.
brown people from West India.
Yep.
You know, so it's ridiculous the way that these terms have been misinterpreted in order to feed this false line of propaganda about, you know, racial superiority and all that other bullshit, when even the
So-called
Nazis were
superiority.
simultaneously killing the Romani people from Punjab
Yep.
while
Yep.
trying to claim them as
Yeah.
their ancestral line
Yeah.
of Aryan.
Like,
Hell, y'all wanna know something funny? You wanna know something interesting? But like yeah, race is rooted in class. If you do not uphold white supremacy, and if you are a group that can be exploited and oppressed, the bourgeois will racialize your group. They will demonize you, dehumanize you,
it will kill you.
and yep, and they will kill you. You want to know what's the funny part? Even Karl Marx wasn't considered fucking white because he was Jewish. He had to face fucking white supremacist fucking
That's the point.
anti-Semitic bullshit throughout his entire life. He wasn't even considered white when he was alive. Not even by the Nazis.
That was the point. That
Yep.
was the, like, what was I gonna say? You know, once again, we've been saying this for years. This is why New Africans reject race as a reality, because you cannot make social and political analysis and principle based on what you see.
Yep.
It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. It's violent and it's reductive. You have to
Exactly.
you have to think about the systems that got us here. Because essentially, if you start calling yourself African, you will be killed. If you start calling yourself a native person, if you start calling yourself an indigenous person, you will be killed. If you start reclaiming your identity as a native Hawaiian, you will be killed. Your people will be killed and your land will be taken, but it will be taken either way. But it's a psychological warfare. It's psychological as well. So, like, if a Latinoized person that is of, let's say, Mayan and Nawa roots, if they start reclaiming their identity as a Nawa and Mayan person, they will be killed.
Mm-hmm.
If they start reclaiming their Olmec roots, they will be killed. Mexica, Zapotec, any other group in ASEAN and so-called Mesoamerica, if they start reclaiming their identity as a native person, if they start boldly reclaiming their destiny as an indigenous person, they will be killed. That's why they make it seem like there's less indigenous people on this continent than there actually are. If you go on Wikipedia, if you look at the map, they say excluding the so-called mestizos.
Hell, Shanti, it literally says, there are literally some articles in Wikipedia that literally fucking says that Taino people are all dead. That there's no more Taino people left, and that fucking irritates and fucking infuriates me.
That is a lie. That is a lie.
Yep.
There are 9 million Boricuas in the diaspora on the island, and in the diaspora, they are still Taino. The Taino still live on through their descendants. Descendants count.
Yep. They do count.
They do count.
Taino people are still here. They're still fucking here. They never left.
Yeah, and the Boricua people are very, 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 very bold in reclaiming their Taino identity.
Yep.
They are very, very bold in showing that they are Taino people as well.
Yep. There are still Taino people in Cuba.
There's Taino people in Cuba still. There's still
Yep.
Tainos in Quisqueya. There's
Puerto
still
Rico,
in the Bahamas and Jamaica. Those people are still here.
even Southern Florida.
Southern Florida, but they want
Yep.
to abandon Florida altogether and say that they're beyond hell and that it needs to be cut off. You're talking about sector native land, first of all, but it's not talking about the state. We're talking about native land here. We're talking about the Seminoles. We're talking about the Tainos. We're talking about
Yep.
those people. We don't give a fuck about this, what the state is doing. We're talking about the land.
Yep. We're talking about the people.
We're talking about the land here.
Yep.
The Dinos have history in modern day South Florida. That's how you know they don't
Yep.
know what the hell they're talking about, because they don't look at history. They only think about what they see.
Yep. They don't look at things through a conceptual lens.
Yeah.
You have to look things conceptually. You have to look at things within their essence. You can't just look at things through perceptual knowledge. You have to understand things you have to understand things through conceptual knowledge, through how they function entirely.
Through dialectal lens.
Yep. Shanti, I fucking love you so much. You're fucking awesome.
Thank you. But this is the truth. And like, I can do it. If I can do this in less than 3 years, so can us.
Anyone can do it.
Like, it's like
I've done it before.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No. It's like, if I can do this in less than 3 years, we can too.
Oh yeah.
Exponential growth.
It's been a whole journey to get to this point, to even get to the young lords. Really? Like, that's a big jump, but it's necessary. And as you know, as a youth, as a colonized youth, as a proud new African of Choctaw roots, it's important for me to really embrace the intersections of my identity, to really embrace the intersection of my destiny, of my people, of my Choctaw folks and my indigenous African folks from back home, to embrace both sides of the pond, since I have them from both. That's who I am. I'm not changing it for anybody. I'm new African and Choctaw. That's who I am. I have no problem in saying that. If they wanna call me, like disconnected, then okay. But I'm telling you right now that I'm a proud new African and a proud Choctaw person, and I'm not changing that for nobody. I'm not changing it for nobody. That's who I am. That is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And especially given in this society how much it tries to whitewash every fucking bit of everybody's roots here, because this fucking place is an amalgam. It is the melting pot. But the system would like for everybody to assimilate once again and lose all cultural ties to every facet of where we come from. And it tries to whitewash every fucking thing. And it's up to us to actually, understand our roots, to understand where all we come from, and to reconnect with that, because we were cut off from those fucking connections.
Right.
And I mean, it applies across the board in every fucking facet. I mean, even the stuff that we've been discussing the last 20 minutes of, the Irish and Scottish and whatnot, they got whitewashed out of their, ancestral fucking cultural ties too.
Jewish people.
Just as much as anybody with pigment, did from theirs. This system is fucked, and it likes to erase all of that and be like, no, you're not that. You're now an American. Assimilate, motherfucker.
Yep. You are white,
really
you are black, and if you go against any of that, we will kill you. That's essentially what it is. And, once again, there are more indigenous people on this continent than they put out, than they want to believe. millions and millions and millions of people strong. They haven't left anywhere.
Right.
Even without connections or quote unquote experience, they are still here. The Nawas are still here through their descendants. The Mexica are still here, including their descendants. The Apaches are still here through their descendants. They're all on the same land. They're all on the same land. We're not talking about 3 different worlds here. We're talking about an entire continent that was taken under siege by Europe.
Yep. There were as many. Sorry.
And like, you're not talking about 3 different worlds here.
Right.
You're not talking about, you're not talking about the US, you're not talking about Canada. You're talking about the Choctaw, you're talking about the Yakuts, you're talking about the Tainos, you're talking about the Mexica, the Mayans,
Navajo,
the Zapotecs, every indigenous person on this continent you're talking about, including their millions of descendants.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. Hell, even I was gonna add, even parts of Europe need decolonization. Not a lot of people know that. Even parts of Europe need fucking decolonization. Ireland, Scotland, Wales, as well as in Spain, because there's actually an indigenous group in Spain, the Basque people. They're indigenous people of Spain, as well as France. They're literally the last pre-Indo-European people alive. Let that sink in for a moment. They are the last pre-Indo-European people alive. That's fucking wild.
Like,
to me. Yep, exactly. The Basque, the Roma, the travelers, and so on and so forth. Even parts of Europe need decolonization.
Hello,
Yep.
like this is hard to understand. Like
exactly.
This is literally simple to understand. This is
Exactly.
literally.
I've said before, and I'll say it again. There are literally groups that don't have that much pigment, but that are still racialized, and it's fucking disgusting as fuck.
We are heavily racialized, gendered.
Yep.
Indigenous people, New Africans, the descendants of the most racialized, gendered, and culturally prostituted people of the world. We are the most culturally prostituted people in the world. We are. That's the truth. Next to the native peoples of this continent.
Mm-hmm.
Our struggles are still the same. We have the same colonizer. It's not about, what pyramid is bigger, than the other. No, it's not that. And regardless if we had history here on this continent or not, one thing is for certain: our struggle is still interconnected. It's literally the same. We have arbitrary states just like the native people of this continent do here, i.e. Nigeria. Nigeria is an arbitrary state. It is an agent of Europe. It is an agent to Europe. It's on the land of the indigenous Igbo and Yoruba and Hausa peoples and other indigenous peoples. It's on indigenous land. But we're so racialized that we're not seen as being indigenous people as well. We're not seen as the creators of humanity. They see this very, very cultural, very fragile place, and they want their piece of the pie. We're not even recognized as being the descendants of indigenous people because they came here. They were kidnapped. 12.6 million of them were kidnapped and brought over here. We count as well. We have Igbo roots. We have Bakongo roots. We have Yoruba roots. Santeria came from the indigenous Yorubas that were in Cuba.
Yep.
Like, our indigeneity is still here. It still lives on through our heritage here and back home. But once again, we're so racialized that we're not seen as being indigenous people as well. That's why they make it seem like there's less indigenous people on this earth right now, currently speaking, than there actually are in real life. Look around you. Look around you. Go into a Chicano neighborhood. Go into a Chicano neighborhood. Go into a Boricua neighborhood. Go into El Barrio. Do you see Spaniard faces? Do you see Italian faces? Do you see French faces?
Exactly.
Do you see Portuguese faces? No, you don't. You don't. You see native faces. You see mixed native faces. You see most of those people have been so stripped of their native identity to become Italian, to become Spaniard, to become French, to become Portuguese. You see, those people have been so stripped and psychologically enslaved that if they reclaim their identity as a native person, if they boldly declare it, that they will be killed, that their land will be destroyed, which once again, it already is either way. But that's the psychological warfare, that if you reclaim who you truly are, you will be neutralized. And that's what happened. That's exactly what happened to them. You see it in modern day El Salvador and Honduras. El Salvador and Honduras didn't exist. There were already civilizations. There were already peoples there. There were already peoples there. So when people say that you need to have, this experience, or do you know where your playbook came from? I always say to them, look at yourself and ask yourself, who are you? Who are you? Are you European, or are you a native person?
Well, sadly, a lot of people don't even know, unless they're lucky enough to get like a DNA test done or something, because so many roots were whitewashed,
Right. Yeah.
Like it's really fucked the way this shit has played out, because, indigenous populations here, it was a matter of, did you get raped by the English, or raped by the French, or raped by the Portuguese, or raped by, on down the fucking list of, places that colonized here. And, there's a lot there, not just, socially, but psychologically, that happened when it comes to them trying to basically whitewash, literally genetically whitewash indigenous populations here, where people got disconnected from those roots, because the children who were the progeny of that got raised white, or if you didn't, then you got kidnapped from your tribe and forced into a Catholic fucking school to make sure you were raised white.
Schools. And that's exactly what it's still happening. It's still happening.
Yep.
Like, just because
to this very fucking day.
Like, just because ICWA didn't get overturned does not mean that Native children are still being are not still being genocided. And that's you think that some not act is going to protect Native children, really? The same people, the same 9 people that have control over much of us, over our livelihoods, over our land. I mean, how violent, how false is that? How violent and how disgusting that we still rely on these not acts, on these assimilationist acts, to get a little piece of so-called liberty, of so-called justice, but it's still happening. And the same people that said that maybe Native children should not be given to our families, but we're still not going to give them their water. That's exactly what happened. So if they think that going to the Supreme Court and going to these institutions that my people built, that my ancestors built, if they think that it's going to save them, they're dead fucking wrong. Because they know that they won't save them. But once again, because you're so brainwashed by capitalism, because you're so brainwashed by your oppressor, they don't care. They will still continue to protest and march until both of their legs, if they have any, fall off. And that's what's still happening to us. That's what's still happening to us. We keep allowing these institutions to continue to control every single part of our lives. They need to go. They need to go. You cannot be anti-capitalist and keep one faction of it. Once again, it doesn't work like that.
Yep.
It doesn't work like that. And every single so-called Latino, every so-called Hispanic, every so-called mestizo, they deserve every single right to reclaim their native roots. They have every single right to reclaim their native identity, even if they may or may not find what roots they may descend from. They're still a native person either way.
I feel you.
Damn fucking right.
I feel you. Like
right.
that's actually something that I had to learn about and lay my own claim to of understanding who the fuck I am when I came into adulthood. Like, okay, my whole family is mixed. And you know, we knew growing up that my grandfather on my dad's side was half indigenous, half Scottish. We knew that my grandmother was part Black and indigenous and part Irish, but we didn't know shit about any cultural connection. We literally got raised white because they had been raised white. We had no knowledge of anything there culturally, none of that, you know, and it was something that I literally had to do a genealogical project with my mom to learn anything about any fucking thing on either side of the family.
Yeah.
On my mom's side of the family, she's half ethnic Jewish, Palestinian, and half Irish. And so like we didn't know dick. I'm still learning a lot as far as the cultural connections there, of understanding like, okay, we got a white raising, but we ain't as white as we fucking look. And you know, there's more to the story here, and actually understanding that like both being colonized peoples, I understand now why, you know, there was a lot of intermarriage between Celtics and indigenous, being both oppressed groups, you know,
both indigenous people that were colonized.
Exactly.
The Chicanos have a long history with the Irish struggle, with Irish people. You know, they have a revolutionary history together. So
absolutely. Even like, okay, during the potato famine, a lot of people don't realize it. It's not like it was a natural famine. It was the fucking English stealing everybody's food in Ireland and leaving them no fucking choice but to move here to try to actually have land they could grow some food on and not get it fucking hijacked by the English. And during the potato famine, there were tribes here that were sending mutual aid to people in Ireland and in Scotland to help them survive. And it's a very beautiful history of solidarity and companionship and camaraderie between our peoples. That right there, that's how people like me ended up coming into existence as their progeny.
Exactly.
Because they found common ground and related to each other and bonded over that.
Exactly.
You know, and it's a beautiful thing, and it's a shame that I didn't learn about that until my late 30s. you know, the societal whitewashing of every fucking thing and disconnecting people from cultural roots.
They don't want to know. They don't want to know.
Literally. For me, I want to reconnect with my Cuban culture. Right. But in order to reconnect with my Cuban culture, I have to understand the roots of my culture, and Cuban culture has its roots both in Taino culture and New African culture. You know, both of them. You know, both of them have the roots in both African and Taino culture. So understanding those roots will better allow me to reconnect with my culture and my people. And understand the roots of it, you know, because I've said before, and I'll say again, it does not matter who you were colonized, whether it was by the English or whether it was by the Spanish, the French, the Portuguese. You're still indigenous. It doesn't fucking matter who you're colonized. You're still indigenous. You're still indigenous people. You're still New African people.
Define you. It doesn't define you.
Yep.
It doesn't define you. It doesn't matter who it was. It does not define you.
Exactly.
Because
Yeah,
again,
exactly.
all of this.
Also, my sister recently did, well, not recently, but she did an ancestry test. She did that fucking 23andMe shit.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if y'all heard of it. She sent it. She sent it to me. Mind you, this is her results. Now, mine, but I was a little bit surprised by some of the, by some of the results. It says that she is 4.1% West African and 3.2% Indigenous American, which I found really interesting. And then there's the Ashkenazi, because I'm of partial Ashkenazi Jewish descent as well. I believe my great grandfather was Ashkenazi Jewish. He fled from fucking Nazi Germany and came to Cuba. So yeah,
Yeah.
I found that really interesting.
Yeah, it's another point of that solidarity with each other of both being oppressed peoples, that Cuba opened their doors to those fleeing Nazi Germany, like, hey, you can find some safe refuge here. You're welcome here.
Yep.
You
There's
know?
actually a lot. There's actually a
How-
decent
how
number
it-
of Jewish people
By the U.S.
in Cuba.
military.
Yep, because my great grandfather, first he tried coming to the U.S., but he was rejected by the U.S. due to them due to them having that anti-Jewish immigration, anti-Semitic bullshit. So the only other place that my grandfather could go to was Cuba, and there's actually a decent number of Jewish people who are in Cuba who fled from Nazi Germany and who are still there. Not a lot of people know that, but it's really interesting.
It's one of those things that I learned about with my family too, in doing that genealogy project with my mom, and tracing back her father's line, and discovering, like, okay, his side of the family was Sephardic Jews, who, you know, lived in Italy for the longest, but somehow ended up, you know, in Germany when a lot of that rise of fascism was going on. And so when they came over here in the late 1800s on the steamship Gera, they literally fucking changed the spelling of the family's last name in order to pass and be able to get into the States because of that anti-Semitic fucking rule
Right.
against, you know, Jews moving here. And so, like, our family's last name, Lorentz, Lorentz, got changed to Lawrence, Lawrence, to whitewash themselves to not be turned away at the fucking border. Just to be able to survive. They had converted some of them to Catholicism and some to Lutheranism to fucking survive because it was forced assimilation. It was all really fucked. To the point that, like, it took us digging through everything that we could find from the county clerk's office and those, you know, boat records from port cities and stuff to even be able to find that out, because my grandfather never told us, by the way, I'm Jewish. He never talked about that.
Yep.
You know, it was a matter of silence, or else risk, as Shanti said earlier, getting fucking killed for embracing your cultural roots.
Yep.
So, you know, they did what they had to do to survive, but it would have been nice to, you know, have any kind of cultural connection there too. You know, like, we didn't know jack shit until we started digging through these records, and I traced our family line back to the city of Laurentum in southern Italy, and from there back to West Asia, to Palestine, you know, of going, oh, okay, well, we didn't fucking know, you know. Like, how much fucking whitewashing does everybody in this country have to fucking go through, you know? And it's
A lot.
a lot of work to dig through those records and actually be able to find any kind of knowledge and awareness about where we actually fucking come from, you know. And even with ties here, like, I'm gonna have to dig through tribal records to even find what tribe my grandfather's mother was in, I don't know. My best guess is that she was either Potawatomi, or she might have been Saginaw Chippewa, just given the areas that she grew up in. Those are the largest tribes in those areas. Things like that, but I don't fucking know, because I don't have access to those tribal records. You know, there's all kinds of things like that, that we should be able to easily access and be able to learn about ourselves and where we come from. That, you know, it's like there's roadblock after roadblock to when it comes to even discovering who you are.
Yep.
The system
Literally.
to be defined by, nope, you're all
Whiteness.
American now.
Yep. Literally. It's fucking disgusting as hell. And discussing how different immigrants who weren't considered who were considered white within the racial hierarchy had to fucking conform and assimilate and fucking change and get rid of their culture just to fucking survive. That shit is disgusting as fuck. You know, it's fucking important. You know, I've used this example before, and I've said before, the census on who is or isn't considered whiteness all depends on what will maximize capital. That's it. You know, I've used this example before. And I was talking about it a little bit earlier. Under Tsarist Russia, Georgians, Jewish people, Poles, Caucasians, actual Caucasian people, indigenous Siberians, Asian ethnicities, and all other Slavic ethnicities were not considered white within Tsarist Russia. The only people who were considered white within Tsarist Russia were, you guessed it, the European Russian people. Those were the only people in Tsarist Russia at the time that were considered white. However, after the Bolshevik Revolution, which was primarily composed of Jewish people, not surprisingly, after the Bolshevik Revolution, in order for the other capitalist European countries to protect their interests and to uphold the contradictions of capitalism and white supremacy, all of a sudden, all Russians were no longer considered white. Not even the European Russians were considered white anymore. Right. And under Nazi Germany, all Slavic ethnic groups were no longer considered white and were considered quote unquote Untermensch. Whether or not you are or are not white, all literally depends on your agency, the capital, and what will maximize profit and uphold the interests of the bourgeois. That's literally fucking it. The moment that Russia became a socialist state, all of a sudden, all Russians were no longer considered white. If for instance, like how we were talking earlier, how Irish people who have conformed and who have whitewashed their history are considered quote unquote English. How much you bet that the moment that they rebel and the moment that Ireland becomes a socialist state, all of a sudden Irish people are no longer white. The same shit that it sorry if I'm stuttering, but I hope I hope y'all understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. And you're right. A lot of people don't realize that the area that was to become Russia was originally settled by Vikings.
Yep.
Nordic people, the Viking Rus are literally the ones Kievan Rus. They're the ones who started that settlement with building the city of Kiev and then spreading westward from there, which turned into the Russian Empire. And so only those people who were of Nordic descent were considered quote unquote white as of about 500 some years ago, when they started, latching onto this fucked concept of, race being divided by skin color. And so only those people who were of that Nordic descent were considered white, and everybody else was othered. All the way down to even Lenin and Stalin were, dark white.
They were not white. Literally.
they were not
Lenin was half
Nordic.
Jewish. Lenin was half Jewish, and Stalin was Georgian.
Yep. And so when you see the colorism being applied so vastly in situations like that, just to bring about more oppression, it's beyond fucking ridiculous. And it's parallel here of, Irish and Scottish and Italian not being considered white. It was that they were not considered white until they decided to start participating in racial oppression and bigotry against Black and brown people. And then it was, okay, we'll bring you into the fold. Like in Italian's case, it was, okay, well, you're dark white, close enough. And, in Celtic's case, okay, I guess we can ease up on calling you troglodytes, so here, you can come into the fold too if you'll participate in this systemic racism. And it's all fucked.
So literally, what I just described, that exact fucking same shit is happening with fucking Zionists. Literally, the exact same fucking thing.
It absolutely is. That comes down to colorism as well, because Mizrahi Jews who never left Palestine, and Sephardic Jews who migrated into like Southern Europe, but mostly were intermarrying with Romani people from India and intermarrying with Italian and Spanish people who were also dark white, became deemed lesser than the Ashkenazi, who had a greater concentration of white genetics being mixed in because they migrated further north in Europe and intermarried with Germanic peoples. And so that the colorism comes to play even in the Jewish communities, because it's caused some divisiveness there. And we see it broad and fucking clear in how the Ashkenazi white supremacist Zionist fucking government of Israel operates, that they're over there mass murdering, genociding our Arab cousins, and
Israel does not exist. Israel does not exist.
Yep.
Right.
Fuck Israel. It's Palestine.
It's
a place in name only. That's
it.
Right. It's a colonization.
Exactly. Israel is as valid as the US. It's not.
Like this illegitimate shit right here, that's one of the things I find extremely frustrating as a Jewish woman, because I've, wanted to scream at the top of my fucking lungs, what the fuck is going on here? Because Zionism is a political ideology that is based in white supremacy, and these Zionists in power there are doing the same fucking shit is what the Nazis did to Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews in Europe.
Literally.
It's the same fucking thing.
It's colonialism.
Genocide of actual Semite people in our fucking homeland there. And they're killing off not just our Palestinian Arab cousins, they're killing off Mizrahi Jews too, in order to steal their land and their homes, to give them to white Ashkenazi, who they want to give right of return to, come there and live. And it's really fucked. It's like, what makes you think you have the right to just start killing people or kicking them out and making them go to mass ghettos of the West Bank and such, to live, so that you can give their nice homes to people who have never stepped foot on this soil before? Just
right.
Even the fact that I'm a quarter Jewish, I could claim right to return if I wanted and go back there, and somebody would end up fucking homeless. some family would in order to provide me with shelter. What the fuck makes me entitled to that? You know, like that's all that takes is just
Exactly.
having, you know, some Jewish ancestry, and I could claim that. A lot of people do that, not even thinking about or having consideration for the fact that they're unhousing a lot of people left and right there who have the right to keep their fucking homes, you know.
Yep.
And it's all
On their land.
colonizer trash.
I
I could
fucking
rant
love.
for days about this shit because it frustrates me to no fucking end. That
Yep.
the Palestinian people literally sent soldiers in World War II to fight the fucking Nazis and free the Ashkenazi from the Nazis, and
They did.
got colonized for it. That's the thanks
Yep.
that they got for helping free Ashkenazi from Nazis, is they got fucking colonized and are now being brutalized and genocided for it.
Yep. It's fucking.
Right.
It's fucking disgusting. The U.S. is literally just using fucking Ashkenazi Zionist white supremacists to push U.S. meddling further within Western Asia. That's literally it.
Yeah.
That's all they're fucking doing. The same fucking shit. The same fucking way they funded the Nazis to benefit from their later exploitation and imperialism. They're doing the exact same thing with these Zionist groups. They're funding these right-wing white supremacist groups to later benefit from their exploitation and oppression. Literally.
Right. And traumatizing countless fucking people in the process,
Yep.
you know, to bring things full circle to the fucking psychology of being colonized. Look at how many people are being traumatized left and fucking right by this shit. Look at how many children have been fucking murdered in front of other kids while they're playing outside in the Gaza Strip. Look at how many fucking people have been completely disenfranchised by being booted from their homes. This is generation after generation of fucking trauma being inflicted for
Since
nothing more than the
1948.
US and NATO to fucking build a stronghold in West Asia that they can use as a point of fucking political and military power to try to coerce other countries in the area to bend to their fucking will.
Yep. Literally. Hey, you want to know what's the funny thing, Zen? You want to know what's the funny thing? The moment the moment Ashkenazi Jewish people, if they ever were to stop being useful to the U.S. and their little ploy of imperialism, they would literally be fucking discarded by the U.S. They would be fucking killed. They're only white. They're only considered white. They're only considered white as useful as they are to the U.S. But the moment they're no longer useful, the moment that they are no longer aiding the U.S. in their maximization of profits, if the Ashkenazi community, if the Ashkenazi people, if they're starting to grow a large sense of solidarity and communist thought within Ashkenazi people, the U.S. would fucking shut down accepting them into the racial hierarchy and start fucking attacking them. Literally.
And it's all fucked.
Yep.
Words of George Carlin, it's all bullshit and it's bad for you.
It's in the words. I forgot. I was gonna do a funny. I forgot who said it, but in the words of some guy that I forgot. Fuck them kids.
Oh my god.
I forgot.
Oh,
I forgot what his name was. What was his name again?
I don't know. So many people say fuck them kids these days
Fuck them
that I don't
kids.
know where it stemmed from originally.
Fuck them
But,
kids. In the words of a wise man.
It's all fucked seeing,
It's all fucked.
globally the impact of colonization and how it has mind fucked so many peoples, so many cultures, and how much trauma it's fucking caused,
Right.
all in pursuit of profit, you know. And it brings my thoughts also circling back to what you said earlier, Shanti, about Africa don't need your fucking help. Africa has all the resources it could ever want. And
Literally.
it brings to mind
We
what
are the world.
Parenti said.
Yep.
Michael
We are the
Parenti.
world.
Yep, Michael Parenti pointed out, you don't fucking colonize an area that is poor. You colonize areas that have massive wealth of resources.
Yep.
And
The problem
infrastructure,
there.
and philosophy, and institutions that do not
Yep.
rely on indoctrinating their people.
Yep.
Yep.
You
Literally.
have institutions pre-colonization, and you have institutions during colonization, which is still happening, of course. They are not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Nope. The
They
fact of the matter is, the way that the world now fucking likes to deem areas third world countries and shit, that's
They took that
That's
shit from us.
basically them saying these are the areas we fucking raped and pillaged of all their resources
Yeah.
to the point of causing mass destitution and poverty.
They
Yep.
took all that. They took
Yep,
our coal.
they took
They
it.
took our rubber. They took that. We
Mm-hmm.
already are rich in resources, but they
Yep.
steal them and they loot them. We already had civilizations.
Yep.
Right?
We have
Africa does
everything in
not-
the
Beautiful
fucking world that
city.
they want.
Yep.
Beautiful
Africa
cities with universities.
Yep.
They had greater fucking knowledge than even what was held in the Library of Alexandria. Most of that knowledge came from Africa, from the Moors
Yep.
coming and teaching Europeans a fucking thing or two about math and science and everything, all the way down to bathing.
And Plato.
that
And Plato too.
was rooted in
Plato.
Africa.
And that's why the Black Plague happened, because they didn't have an infrastructure like us.
Yep. Literally. I've
They
said
did
before.
not have infrastructure.
Yep. They fucking didn't. Hell, I've actually done a little bit of research, and one of the other causes that led to the Black Plague becoming worse is during that time. There was obviously a stigma against black cats because they were considered fucking witches or fucking whatever. So the church actually did like a whole fucking campaign where they where every time they saw a black cat, they would just fucking kill it. And guess what? And the less cats there were, the less the more rats were able to spread across the city.
Like, hello.
Yep.
Hello.
Right, cats are pest control, and they were keeping that shit in check until idiots decided, oh, the color of their fur must make them an evil familiar to a witch. We got to kill them. This is
This is what we're talking about. This is exactly what we're talking about. When they talk about the so-called separation of church and state, they are both the same thing.
Yep.
Okay. You cannot separate the church from the state because it's literally the same thing. It's the same institution.
Yep.
They're
all part of the state. They're all part of the state.
They're all part of the state. They're all part of the church. They're all part of all of it.
The same way
You cannot separate the two because they're the same.
The same way you cannot separate the military complex from the state. You can't separate the church from the state. They're a part of it.
You can't. Because that is an impossibility. It's an impossibility on purpose.
Yep.
That's the point.
I mean, I have hope for our ability to do so in the revolution and with forming an interim communist state and actually having some very foundational ground rules of your religion is not allowed to touch the fucking laws of the land because you don't have the right to force other people to participate in your religion. Your rights end where theirs begin, and self-determination and autonomy belong to everybody, regardless of what religion you belong to or lack thereof. That religion should not ever fucking fucking be allowed to touch the laws. If you
Yep.
want to follow the laws of your religion, you can fucking do so at home. That is what you are choosing to govern your life by. But motherfucker, don't tell me because you're on a diet I can't eat a cookie. Fuck you.
I'm gonna however many fucking cookies I want.
Goddamn
No,
right.
Goddamn
Because
right.
there's no ethical allowance for that. When it
Yep.
comes to ethics and acknowledging human rights that are all based in the right to not be harmed, excuse me, but anybody trying to force their flavor of religion onto anybody else is causing harm. They don't have that right. And that's something I have a huge problem with what's happening as far as this colonizer bullshit in this fucking country, is we have extremely fucking fascist, fundamentalist fucking people trying to literally take over the government with their little fucking foot soldiers for Christ and their Joshua generation, literally programming these kids to think that it is their job as a quote unquote good Christian to get into government and force these arbitrary ass fucking rules of Christianity that even different sects of Christianity can't fucking agree on. But the fundies want to force that shit into law. And that's what we're seeing right now. The people who are in government right now that are in like their 30s and stuff, they're the oldest of the Joshua generation who have been mind fucked and programmed to think that they're going to save the world by forcing Jesus into the United States fucking laws. And that's where we're seeing all this bigotry come from. That's where we're seeing all the anti-gay, anti-trans laws coming into play. That's where we're seeing them try to ramp up systemic racism with Christo-fascist cunts like Ron DeSantis trying to completely erase slavery and things like that from the textbooks.
an actually Latin man.
Yeah, they're trying to pretend as if slavery
Okay.
was a benefit because you learned some skills there, right? Get the
No.
fuck out of here.
We already
Yeah.
have skills.
Yep.
We already have skills.
I know. I
Yo.
know. But these
Yo,
racist
Sister Zen.
cunts don't want to acknowledge that because they seem to fucking think that everything that ever happened developmentally is fucking thanks to white men. And it's like, what
Yeah.
the fuck did you bump
We
your
were a
goddamn head on?
village.
Especially
were a
when
village.
motherfuckers will be on social media talking this shit from their phone in their hand that they wouldn't have if it wasn't for black inventors. Get the fuck out of here.
Yep. Literally.
like-
Light bulb.
Like, and
Light bulbs-
essentially, yeah,
I'm
and
sorry.
essentially me reclaiming my history and telling y'all that, you know, we did not quote unquote develop skills. They were already developed. Y'all took them from us. Y'all
Yep,
kidnapped
literally.
us. But,
Yep.
but when I say that I'm woke and proud. I'm woke and
Hell
proud.
yeah.
I am
Hell
woke
yeah.
and proud of it. I'm proud to be woke. That is our word. We made that word. We
Yep.
made wokeness. We made wokeness. We made that. We made that word. We did. Y'all took it from us and made it one of the most violent words ever.
Well, it's really fucked because these people who try to use the word woke as a fucking slur have no concept of
racist
what it
too.
means. It's
They
like,
are racist
motherfucker, it
too.
means that we are awake and aware to the
Of what
fucking
y'all are doing to
systemic
us.
racism and other forms of bigotry that have been used to infantilize people and to keep them pushed down and fucking oppressed.
We literally
Because-
made that word.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
You know,
African
both.
people made wokeness. We
Both-
did.
Yep. Both the right. I'm sorry. I was gonna say both the right and the left, quote unquote left, both conservatives and liberals have co-opted and whitewashed what that word even fucking means because liberals fucking use the word woke to associate wokeness with liberalism. That fucking disgusts me.
Right, and fuck
It's
them. They're still fucking right wingers.
Yep,
Liberals
they're still
are
rightists.
still capitalists, therefore
Yep.
they are right wing. And I get really pissed when I hear them try to when I hear them try to refer to themselves as being the left, because it's like, you ain't left, you are still extremely right of center, because left versus right is a fucking economic stance, and you're still upholding capitalism, and now you're co-opting and doing fucking shit that literally shows
a capitalist.
what it means to be an ally, let alone a comrade. You know, like, it's really fucked, and it all feeds into what wokeness is trying to fight against, because to be woke means to be educated and have some
aware of your
and yes, the awareness that comes with that, because if anything, the changes in our education system and textbooks should be, oh well, we shouldn't just be teaching about slavery, we should also be teaching about Black inventors, about people who actually fucking kick ass in history.
Oh yeah.
And have fucking created all kinds of beautiful things that we wouldn't even fucking have the technology that we have today if it was not for these brilliant people. That there is so much more to the story than just slavery and civil rights movement and all of the rest of Black history being fucking erased from the textbooks of everything that's happened here, that we would not have the developments that we have if it was not for Black and brown people being fucking brilliant.
Yep, literally. You know, I've said this before, and I'll say, yep. You know, there are so many inventions that have been made by new African people that people don't know of. Did you know that the first ever successful heart surgery was done by a Black person? Light bulbs was created by a Black person. Potato chips were created by a Black person. Hell, water guns was created by a Black person.
3D.
Yep.
We made that. We are the world.
Yep.
We are the world. We made that.
Yep.
Y'all hate so much, y'all will not use any of this stuff. Don't use any of it. Don't use any of it. Don't use lights. Don't use chairs. Don't use GPSs. Don't go see a 3D movie because we made that possible.
Right.
Yep. So the idea of cell phones was literally fucking stolen by fucking companies. Literally.
It was a Black woman who created the fucking coding and the tech that was later able to, you know, be used as the foundation of cell phones.
Yep. Literally. So much that is within society has been built by non-white people, and it fucking disgusts me and pisses me the fuck off. How all of it has been whitewashed, how it has been defanged, and how all of it has been attributed. So I got something in my throat. And how all of the inventions that have been made by non-white people are just attributed to the government or white people doing it. And it's fucking
attributed to the white people who fucking stole the shit.
Yep, who stole it, literally.
Oh, well, see,
they
now
stole all
I've
of
copywritten it.
Yep.
They stole blues. They stole rock.
Yep.
They stole soul. They took jazz. They took reggae from us.
Yep.
Mind you, reggae is
heavy metal.
A New Orleans R&B. So, yeah.
A lot of people don't realize rock and roll would not fucking exist if it wasn't for white artists literally stealing musical styles from jazz and R&B,
queer Black people,
and soul,
from queer Black people. We made rock and we made gospel. Chicago
heavy metal too.
Zeta Tharp made rock. She was the first one to really put it all together.
Yep.
A queer
Black.
Yep, she was the first rock star, and she was
one. She was the first one. Her first ever recording session when she was 23 on Halloween of 1938 with Lucky Milliondaire's Orchestra for the Decca label. One of her songs, Rock Me, was cited as influenced by Elvis, by Jerry Lee Lewis, by Little Richard, whom she met at a concert of her own in Macon, Georgia, Little Richard's hometown. Like, she was the first one to put it all together.
Yep. That's literally where the term rock and roll came from.
Yep.
Because what she named that song and the feeling it invoked when she sang it.
Wait, what's her
Of
name?
like, wow, we're
Wait,
really rocking and rolling now,
Wait,
and made people want to get the fuck up and dance.
hell yeah.
Yeah.
What's her name? Again, I want to search her up.
Sister
I want to
Rosetta,
search her. Sorry, what?
Sister Rosetta Tharpe of Southern
Mhm.
Arkansas,
Yep.
the deep
Sister what?
South.
Sister,
Rosetta.
Sister Rosetta. Okay, Sister Rosetta. Tharpe.
Tharp. Yep.
Tharpe.
Tharpe. Gotcha.
Yep. She was
Thank
a
you.
badass.
Yep. You
She was
you know
badass. She was
you
a
know,
badass. She made the SG guitar into a rock staple.
that's
Because
fucking
she created
awesome. You know,
above my head, like come on.
yep, I've said before, and I'll say again: rock, gospel, jazz, blues, R&B. All of these are new African song genres. All of them have their roots in Black culture. You know, In fact, you know, a lot of these songs are known for being very energetic and wanting to get up and dance. Same things with songs in Africa. There's that link, you know. Same thing. Same thing.
From
Same thing.
that's
Yep.
why we call it New African, because it's our
Yep.
transformed
Yep.
indigeneity. It's our indigenous roots in the music. It's in the music. The Bo Diddley beat. It came from indigenous from I forgot which indigenous groups in Africa, but you know, we descend from them, and it carried.
Yep.
It's a transformed indigenous nod to our heritage. That's what it is. The Bo Diddley beat, like that's us. That's our folks back home.
Even country and grassroots would not be what they are without Black influence.
Yep.
The
Literally.
roots of country and grassroots are from the melding of musical styles from freed Black people and poor white people coming together, jamming, and you know, creating these musical styles together. Like, you know, I mean, I don't really care too much for most country, and especially pop country. It's shitty, but old country actually still had those musical
Old country
roots displayed in grassroots stuff. The folk music still
Our roots.
definitely does, and that's the shit that will get you the fuck up off your and dancing your ass off when it comes to, you know, those types of music. Of like, you can't hear bluegrass and not get the fuck up and dance. Well, guess what? That comes from that melding in Appalachia of free Black people and poor white people who
that
had
came
a
from
lot
us.
in common. And you know, they had similar oppressors and they had similar class status, and they found common ground there and created entire new genres of music together there.
Yep.
Like, there is not one facet of music that cannot in some way, shape, or form be tied back to having African roots there when it comes to
and native
the
roots
forms of music that developed here in the States.
and native
African roots. Yep. African and native roots. It's
Yep.
yo, you know what I love? You know I love this book club. This meeting was started at 5 p.m. and right now for me it's 9:31. I fucking love that.
we were chilling for like an hour and a half, but yeah, we are at 3 hours of this recording, so we probably should wrap up the recording, but I can definitely leave the room open so we can continue the conversation. Yeah, thank you for bringing that to my attention, because yeah, now we've got a 3-hour class for folks to watch. Like, holy shit.
Yep. Yo, I really do. I genuinely do fucking hope that at least like I said before, at the very least, as long as one person is watching these and becoming radicalized and is becoming more conscious and informed, I consider that a success. You know, I consider that a victory at the end of the day. As long as someone is being inspired by these meetings,
as long
then
as you hear their ancestors' voice.
Yep.
Yes.
Then we're doing something, and that makes me happy. But yes, it's probably best if we end the call or the recording.
Well, we
I
can
mean.
stay on the call. There's actually some links here that Sean shared into the chat that would be interesting to dive into and discuss. But I will end the recording here, and we can just stay on and, you know, visit and continue our therapy session and diving into these resources that Sean shared. So with that said, everybody in the YouTube audience is watching this, thank you for joining us. And all power, we'll see you back here next week for another section of this chapter of the Wretched of the Earth. If you'd like to also join us for the second Rainbow Coalition readings, we are reading The Young Lords in that group. And so we'll be back with the next segment of that on Friday. And other than that, all power.